believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo, also known as Ricky Brands, and a great episode for you today. Today we have returning guest, a regular on Ripple Effect Podcast, and a regular on the Union Don't Wanted, my good friend Teace Snyder. He's also the host of the Conspiracy Synergy Show, which you can now find also on Rockfin, and I'll put links to that in the show description. And we have a discussion about a lot of different things, so hold on tightly. You're going to enjoy this conversation. With that said, let's keep this intro short. And let me quickly tell you, this is a value for value show. If you get some value out of this conversation or any of the shows I bring to you, please consider giving some value back. It doesn't have to be financial. If you're not in a good financial situation, don't worry about it. I can definitely relate to times being tough right now. So please give some value back in other ways, like rating the show, reviewing the show, telling people about the show, posting the show on any social media platform you might be on. And that helps fight against the algorithms that are censoring shows and conversations like these. And hopefully, by helping spread the word about the Ripple Effect Podcast, we can reach some listeners, some fans of the show that are in good financial situations. And if you're one of those people, here's some ways you can support the show. We have a merch store, which of course you can find all these links in the show description or on my website, therippleeffectpodcast.com. Check out the merch store, get some t-shirts, hoodies. I know it's hot out, it's summer, so we also have tank tops, kids clothes, tons of stuff. We have a PayPal account if you want to do a one-time donation. We have a Patreon page if you want to support us monthly. And thank you so much, everyone who does. Within 24 hours of me posting a new episode, I get thousands of downloads. And if all those people listening donated $1, just $1, you could help me with my dream of doing this full time. And I can get you more shows, more interviews, and I can release them quicker. I can book more interesting guests. I can spend more time researching for each show. And it would just be a awesome thing that we can all contribute with doing as little as $1 a month. Just think about how many ridiculous things we spend money on, like a expensive coffee at Starbucks or some chips at the convenience store or whatever it may be. And for less than that, you can help a host that hopefully you like produce a show that hopefully you also like for a living. And that would be awesome. So it's for as little as $1 a month. So if you can, please support me on Patreon for $1 a month. And if you do support me on Patreon for as little as $1 a month, you can join us with our Patreon podcast, which is a podcast I do with my Patreon supporters once a month. And I'll be scheduling the next one very soon. So if you want to participate in that, please check out the Patreon links in the show description or on my website. Other ways of supporting the show, check out Richard Grove's University of Reason. If you're looking for a new career path, if you're looking to expand on some skills or maybe learn some skills or just connect with a libertarian, freedom-oriented minded community, check out the University of Reason and the autonomy courses. Also, Element Electrolytes is another great way of supporting the show. The product was created by Rob Wolf, who's been on the Ripple Effect Podcast and also just about on all the major health and nutrition podcasts, including JRE. And he created an amazing product that adds flavor to your water, helps you stay hydrated, has no artificial flavors, no artificial sweeteners, and it can help with many symptoms that we have that is due to dehydration that we might not even be aware of, like headaches, soreness, fatigue, so many different things. And if you use the link in the show description or on my website to purchase Element Electrolytes, you get a free gift. And every time you use that link, you will be supporting the Ripple Effect Podcast, and you'll be getting that free gift. So please make sure to use the link in the show description or on my website for Element. Last few things, if you like the music that you hear on the Ripple Effect Podcast, please check out the link on my website to purchase Theory 6 Music, which is my solo project, and it's the theme song that you hear on the show. We also have a Telegram chat. If you want to connect, if you want to hang out, please check out the Telegram chat, and you can find that in the show description or on my website. On my website, you can also find all the social media platforms I'm on if you want to connect with me that way. And that's about it. Enjoy this amazing conversation with Teace. Thank you, everyone who does support the show. Thank you, everyone who's considering supporting the show. And I'll talk to you guys on the next one. Peace. How's my sound?
Always lovely and wonderful. How you doing, Ricky?
Saw that coming.
Yeah, obviously. How could you not?
What's new?
What's up?
What's new? How you been?
Ups and downs, you know, the merry-go-round of whatever the hell is going on anymore. How about yourself? What's going on in your world?
Just craziness. Just busy. I mean, honestly, I'm sure I'm not any more busy than the next person. It's weird, right? Because it's like when 2020 happened, we had like our whole lives just stood still, and we're like, wow, this really sucks. Like I have no purpose. There's a lack of social communication with other people that I enjoy and was probably way more necessary than many people probably thought. And then we're like, oh, we got our life back, and we start getting crazy again. Like, you know, we start doing things, booking things, and having weekend trips, and then going here and going there, and having all these responsibilities kind of get back in our lives. And it's like, I'm not, you know, even though we're definitely happier being busy, I'm not sure that, you know, I'm not sure. We might have overregulated where we just like we went too extreme in the other direction. I'm not sure it's like a good thing that we're this busy all the time. And when you take it away, it definitely sucks. But when I wonder sometimes how much of the now of the present we're actually in, because it's like we're always like go go go. It's like sometimes like things just fly by, and I'm like, I wonder if I was a little less busier, how much more I would enjoy that moment if my brain wasn't thinking about the next thing I had to do, or the next appointment, or the, you know, or being late for work, or being late to a podcast, or whatever, you know. And I see you, like, you seem like you have a pretty laid back lifestyle in regards to like you always seem laid back, so maybe that's why I assume that, because one, you actually literally are usually leaning back, so it's probably that's a part of it. That's
the whole trick. That's everything.
Am I misrepresenting you?
I'm really good at being stressed out so much that it seems seamless, but that doesn't mean that it is. But I guess it's also that, I don't know, I find it, as long as you're able to every once in a while step away from the heart palpitation rhythm that is the contemporaries like drum beat, and it never stops. And, you know, I know what you mean. It's like flipping out in response to it all the time. How do you really live in the now? And it's like everyone's always plugged in, even if you're sitting down with them. It's like, even if they're not looking at their screen, they're thinking about their screen. It's like you're still plugged in. Yeah. So I know what you mean, like that. And it's impossible to get away from, because it's your job to do it. And then it's just like, so I know what you mean, man. It's a weird feeling right now, getting out there and finding what normal is anymore. What is that? Does it exist? Did we kill it? Is it nothing but echo chambers where we each have our own definition and then we fight anytime we go outside? I think that's how it works now, right? Yeah.
And it's almost like you want to make the most of your time on earth, right? So it's like you being busy also means you're trying to accomplish things, you're trying to build your legacy. I guess, for lack of a better term, you're like building your legacy. You're trying to create something that's timeless. You're trying to create memories, experiences, and that takes like action and movement. But it's like, and then if your whole day or life gets consumed with too much action and movement, do you actually really enjoy any of it? It's almost okay. Here's maybe, I was gonna say a good example, but now that I'm thinking about it again, it might be an awful example, but it's a example nonetheless. It's a example. So it's almost like going to a wine tasting, right? Like, if I only have an hour, I could try all the wines, right? And like just hammer through wines and just like pretend there's like 100 wines. I'm like, if I really hurry, I could try all these wines. And it's like, great, I got my money's worth. I got to somewhat experience all these wines. Or I could say, you know what, I'm going to take my time, even if I don't experience all of them. Maybe I'll take my time with the ones I really like, really be in the moment. And maybe it prevents me from being able to find something new that I really like and some other wine. But at least the ones that I did try, I'm really enjoying. So it's like this balancing act of like, you want to be busy because it means you're doing something, right? You're not just being a lazy procrastinating person, which is very easy for us to do, and it's in our nature to do it. But you also don't want to go and like, you ever meet like entrepreneurs? It's funny because it's like 5 minutes talking to somebody, even if they don't talk about their business, I already know if they've had a successful or not successful business because yeah, and because all the really successful people are like they're never really in the now, like they're such, at least the ones I've experienced, even the ones that I've been on this podcast, most of them are very go go go, right? Like they barely, like they ask you a question, you answer it, and they're already thinking about like the next thing they got to do. They're barely liling, or they never really feel like they're engaged in the conversation. My wife's boss, I love him to death, great, love him to death. He's a great guy. He's he's been very good to my wife. He's been just a really great employer, and he's kind of like family. We have a lot of mutual friends and stuff. But he's the type of guy that like he's perfect for the restaurant business because he owns a restaurant, and like the fast paced lifestyle of like a busy Friday or Saturday night where it's like gotta go, like he's really good at like small talk with you, but he's small talking because he just wants to engage for a little bit. He doesn't really care what you have to say that much. It's like, hey, how are you doing? And like you're answering him and he's looking over there. He's like, oh, I'll be right back. Got to help them out. And it's like, I'm like, you didn't really care about my response, did you? But he's perfect for that environment because he's go, 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 go. But do you miss out on something? It's like great in regards to building a business because I had what's his name, Clay Clark on recently, and he's the guy with General Flynn, who has that General Flynn kind of tour that's going around where they have a bunch of speakers and stuff. And Clay Clark, his people like contacted my people, which is me, and he'd like this to come on the show and kind of promote this tour that he's doing with General Flynn and a bunch of speakers. And Clay's he's one of those guys. He's won tons of awards for like all these startups that he started and all these businesses, and he's been in like so many different things, and you could tell he's one of those guys that like he's a go-getter. He's like from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, he's talking fast, he's moving quickly, he's which is great because he's accomplished plenty of things that I'm sure I haven't accomplished. I'm sure if you looked at both of our bank accounts, they'd be drastically different. But but it never really feels like he's in the now. Like even if you hear interviews with him, right? It's not, and I'm not bashing the guy because I think everybody, like, we all have character. It's not flaws. Like we have things about our character and personality that will be good and maybe necessary in one aspect of our lives, either a job or our family life or whatever it may be, whatever hobbies, passion projects we have, and yet somewhere else could be a flaw, right? So like those type of guys, I know this kid who started a landscaping company. He came from nothing. Like he moved out at a really young age, never had anything handed down to him at all. He had a poor relationship with his parents, but he was like one of those go-getters. Like he was always like asking me questions. He was always like, work, like nonstop working, like from the beginning of the day I'd be like 6 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night, whatever time it is, you'd see him driving around with his truck, like, working. And I'm just like, wow, like this guy, he's motivated. And he's just like always on the go. And you talk to him, he's always kind of talking fast and like, almost like he drank too much coffee, kind of like on the go and full of energy. And all that energy is good. And it's good to have that motivation. But again, like sometimes I look at people like that and I'm envious of it, right? Because I'm like, I am not as motivated in regards to like my job or what actually pays the bills, which obviously hurts your ability to pay the bills. And but I'm very motivated. Like you couldn't give me more motivation to be as present as possible with my kids, or be a good friend, help somebody out if I can, just be a good person at my podcast, which gets in the way a lot of like my job, and because a lot of times I'm like, instead of thinking about how do I grow my business or how do I help focus and think about like a project that we're doing, I'm thinking about like the podcast, like a great show I listen to, or a possible great future guest, or I'm listening to content that's thought provoking to help just expand my thinking, which will in result help the podcast, because I hope I can maybe spark better conversations or whatnot, or bring a little bit more to the table. So it's like it's weird, like you meet these people who are very, very good at their job, and I've been at pre-construction meetings or whatever where you're like, wow, that guy really knows his shit. I'm like, I've been doing this for a long time. I barely know what's coming out of his mouth. Like I barely can keep up with it. And I'm like, but it's because all his focus has been on this one thing. And then you sit down and have a conversation with them and you refer to like, yeah, this reminds me of that quote by blah blah blah. And they're like, who the hell's that? And I'm like, what do you mean you've never heard of whoever, Jordan Peterson or somebody who you figure, I'm like, they're pretty famous, I would say, or whoever. And you're like, wow, this person's been living in a bubble of their job. And it's been having that type of OCD is great, to be really good at your job. But if your job, and I guess who am I to say that it's not as meaningful as maybe doing something else, if your purpose is not to do something meaningful and just to gain financial wealth, then I don't know if it's like, if that sacrifice is worth having or making that sacrifice of a complete, like my son loves soccer, right? And like today I dropped him off at soccer camp, and I always like to stick around for a while and watch a little bit and see how he's doing and his progression and whatnot. I was talking to this. I swear I'll let you talk during this interview. I'm so bad. I can't believe people listen to the show. But
Ricky and I get along, so we're more just like catching up at this point. We'll get to like back and forth talking later. Sorry, go ahead.
This guy was there dropping off his kids, and he had an accent, and being a foreigner, I'm always like curious about other foreigners, like where are you from and what's how long you've been here or whatever. And he was from Nigeria, and so we're talking about soccer, and in Nigeria, soccer's huge, just like in Portugal. So we're talking about Premier League, and he's a Liverpool fan, I'm a Tottenham fan, and we're talking about all the ins and outs of that. And then he's like, we was talking about how Nigeria, similar to Portugal, is like they eat, breathe soccer. And he's like, not, and he's like, but my kids are in America and there's a lot of distractions. And I thought he was going to say like TikTok, Snapchat, or whatever. And he's like, we have American football here, we have basketball. I'm like, oh, sports distractions. And then like, so walking away from that conversation, like it hit me, like, and I was thinking it to myself, I'm like, is it a good thing that you have all those options to pick from, and you're not like only raised in one, like in a country where only one sport really matters? Or is it a bad thing, right? Like, it's like, because I'm thinking of my son, he's I'm not, obviously he's my son, so I'm gonna say he's good, but he potentially, his addiction to soccer is so great, and his love to like improve and stuff is so great that I'm like, I think potentially he could definitely do something special with those talents. And he's only 7, but he's already unbelievable, and like kind of getting a lot of eyes and chatter about his how good he can be. And yet like I'm like, oh, it'd be great if he played basketball, because I played more basketball growing up, and he'd get something from basketball athletically. But then I'm like, well, now I look at like him playing another sport not as a way of helping him, but almost hurting him, because I'm like, do you, and this goes to the greater question, Like, do you almost have to be OCD about something to be really great at it? But if you're so OCD about that one thing, do you limit your ability to take in other things that could help with that thing? Does that make what I said made any sense?
Uh, there's a lot there. I could comment on a lot, but yeah, insofar as no, it's a broad spectrum of what is the degree to which you invest in something in order to see the most returns that you want from it, while also not losing yourself to it, or for that matter, being outside of the moment at hand when you're simply engaging with other people who are always in that place, and the frustration that comes with that, and wanting to be successful but not willing to risk who you are in the process of it. And yeah, I grapple with that all the time, and it's like about the idea of specificity is what it's called in like sports specific, like when you're training for the thing that you want to do. So it's like you'd focus on that particular thing in order to see the best rewards specific to that endeavor. So if you want to be good at soccer, play more soccer. It's pretty straightforward, that kind of stuff. So the idea of adding on other sports, you can look physiologically, yeah, it can have that effect. But at the same time, it's a balanced regimen, because like I used to be a trainer. So, and I know you work out, and that's the thing that you're familiar with. And actually, I'll use a pumping iron quote from Arnold Schwarzenegger to illustrate the point. And he said that it's like, you want to surprise the muscle, because then it has no choice but to grow. So some days I'll do light days, some days I'll do heavy days, and I'll always kind of just be surprising it. And that's the thing that ultimately brings the greatest results, and your versatility as a person. So I think that that's kind of a good metaphor, both in the physical and the spiritual and all different kind of walks of life, that we can turn to, which is that the more in which life surprises us, the more in which we end up being more resilient as a result. It doesn't necessarily make it fun to be surprised, but you learn some stuff, and then you're able to move forward with that. Oh, you're muted.
That's there. What was the other quote from Pumping Iron? It's like I'm coming. I thought that was the one that I think. I thought that was the one you're going.
No, I haven't seen that movie in a long time.
I believe that was the because I remember I'm a gym rat, so it's like guys would always talk about, like, we would joke around. You're doing a set, and it's like, or what is it? No, it's better than sex or something, like getting up. It was something along those lines. That's what you get from Arnold.
Yeah.
He But there is a lot of metaphors in that. I mean, you're right. I mean, muscle confusion is important. You do adapt to. That's one thing I tell people all the time. I'm like, I've been working out for a long time myself too, and you'll get really easily stuck in plateaus, and your body will adapt to things. And it's great to do workouts you're familiar with, because you feel strong. They're not intimidating. You can do heavy weight, and then you go do another workout, and all of a sudden it's hard. Your endurance isn't there. Your muscle endurance. You're getting sore. You can't lift as much. And typically that's why gym rats, you hear it all the time in the gyms, like, oh, come work out with me, I'll get you more sore than anybody. And it's like, well, yeah, and if I go work out with that chick, I'll get more sore than ever, because she's doing butt workouts all day and I never work out on my butt. And it's not about the butt muscles but it's about just doing something different that my body's not used to. My body will adapt to my routine. It will adapt to specifically the muscles that I'm focused on that specific day. And all of a sudden I go do something like CrossFit, or if I go do a different type of training, maybe even if I do heavyweight low reps for weeks at a time, once I do lightweight, you would assume because I'm getting stronger, then that would be really easy to do high reps. And all of a sudden, because you train your muscle for strength and low reps, it struggles for the high reps. So now if I'm trying to do, I should be able to do 20 reps of this lighter weight, you struggle because you haven't trained your body to do that type of endurance muscle. So, and there's so many tricks to it, like explosiveness, like working on your negatives is important. Exploding, if you're trying to do like fast twitch muscles, if you're an athlete, you might be more intrigued with training your fast twitch muscles, so you're exploding a little more. Or maybe you want to do kettlebells for more functional workouts. But yeah, the cool thing about exercising is that you really get to put your philosophies to work and see, like, okay, this is how I think I can achieve this. And then you do it and you see the results or the lack of results. So it's not just hearsay, like somebody telling you you should do this and this will do that. And it's like, no, you become the experiment. That's why I never got like there's personal trainers that I knew that, and even some in my gym who you could tell have never worked out ever, and they just wear a shirt that says personal trainer, and I'm like, your body is your business card. Like you have to at least look in shape. Like you don't have to be a freak, And personally, I think if you look like a freak and you're super juiced up, it's deceiving and it's false advertisement because it's like, okay, it's not because you know what you're doing as much as it is because you're taking every steroid that they sell. Like to me, it's like, it still takes working out to achieve a physique and strength. Like I don't want to take anything away from anybody who does a cycle from here to there or whatever. You still do have to show up and you still do have to work out. But if you can do it naturally, without any steroids, then it shows like, wow, like, okay, even though these results are less, you figured it out without that shortcut. And if you can do it like this, then whatever advice you may have might actually work for the average person. Where if I'm doing a bunch of roids and I give you a bunch of advice and all that advice came from my experiences while on the roids, how do I know if it would work for you if you're not on roids, right? So this conversation is everywhere. We're not
Well, I hear you. Like I said, we're kind of just still getting caught up after Ricky and I haven't talked to each other directly for like a year and a half now, but we've hung out indirectly on your show a handful of times, and then Unity Wanted like a couple dozen times, and kind of going in the same orbit. And I've watched you do conversations and you've watched my show. So it's kind of funny pulling everything back together from existing in the internet, because it's little bits of your own life as well as all the things that you've been exposed to. It's like, oh yeah, I was doing this yesterday at the mall. And oh yeah, by the way, this dude who's into this particularly weird occult thing is what I've been paying attention to while I do it. So it's a weird thing to be like present in the moment is simultaneously being very far off. And like we're getting more and more acclimated and accustomed to that idea all the time. So yeah, the conversation's everywhere, but it's like that's what every conversation feels like now, almost in a way. Or like it's like we've gotten kind of like used to the being here now and the being somewhere else at the same time. And so it's like, because I'm trying to think of what you're saying about it as how it applies to my own life, and like how just hyper specific everything is now, and like the metaphor that you were talking about with the exercise is breaking out of that, and it's really true. And I don't know what to do to get people on the same page, kind of like you were saying with the example of the dad talking to his kid, like, oh yeah, the distractions of other sports. It's like being on the same page was the thing that it was ultimately all about. So that other stuff was almost like kind of just like the superfluous aside. So how do we come to common grounds and finding that again right now? That's something I wonder a lot about, not just in the exercises that I do, which isn't that much. I mostly just go for walks, but like also the stuff that I'm exploring and me trying to figure out the next episode I'm going to do. Like, how can I kind of just like talk to people where they're at and find them? And it's really difficult to do creatively right now because you're almost always trying to like work with where people are at and then figure out, okay, well, what does that mean for all of us? And it's like I'm having a really hard time figuring that out right now because of kind of like what you're describing with everyone being and this. Yeah, the things I just alluded to, that it's a weird time. Yeah.
well, isn't it? It's weird because it's almost nice to have these conversations because for a year, 2 years, just about a full 2 years, the only thing that seemed worth discussing was COVID related. It was like one of those things where it's like, oh, all these other curiosities I have take a back seat because this, like, it felt. I say it felt, but and I don't want to kind of diminish how important it was. It felt like the most important thing at that moment to discuss, and probably because it was the most important thing to discuss at the moment. I mean, we basically lived through one of the craziest times in human history when you think about globally everybody being involved and being affected at the same time. And it's like it was nice to eventually have like guys like Michael Millerman on the show and do a show on philosophy, and it was nice to have like other guests on and talk about other topics that wasn't only about COVID, related stuff. Even your show, right? Like you look at your show, the first couple episodes, I'm actually going back and looking at them. You had a couple episodes in a row where it was very much related to COVID, right? And now you probably feel like, maybe you have the flexibility to kind of dive in some other rabbit holes, because it I mean, when you put out those shows, like you did the what was it, like 2 parts, I believe, right? Of COVID 1 and 2, and I don't know what you called them. You just call them episode 3
The
and 4.
first one's modern medical science and toxins in our environment, and that's more just like the history of vaccines and a variety of other toxicological buildups. And the second part was specifically COVID 1984, and I'm gonna have to end up doing a third part to that to be able to like branch into the like holistic side of medicine and the various different ways in which the alternative framework of that kind of stuff is going to begin to blossom in response to the stuff that we've seen happening. But yeah, I know what you mean with everyone being all about COVID for like 2 years straight, and we're all kind of like fatigued, and we want to be able to talk about other things. And yeah, it's that's something that I've tried to do with my show, because once you understand what this stuff is, it's like, yeah, they're using medicine to hijack everybody, but it's like that's just a part of this larger Death Star. And so it's just trying to leapfrog from panel to panel of the larger monstrosity so people can get a sense of what they need to escape from. And right now, yeah, we're all trying to find the escapes that get us there, but at the same time, it's like this constant feeling that we need to continue to beware. It's weird. It's because it's like I want to enjoy life, but is there anything over my shoulder right now? But it's like, okay, is it going to be a hunger thing this week? And it's like that's what they've kind of acclimated us to. It's so peculiar as we wait for things to get worse. You know,
Is that what you think is going to happen? Things are just
I think I look at it this way. It's like it's a proportionate response from the people who don't realize how bad the situation is yet. And that's like how much the elastic is still going to slap and hit people in the face. And there's a lot of that. So it's like those of us who are awake to how bad it is, it's like, oh yeah, okay. We can basically hear anything at this point and it'd fall into our framework of how horrible things can get. But the people who haven't realized that yet, it's like it's a big deal. If you just slip the sentence, it's like 9/11 was an inside job. For some people, they still freak out about it. And it's like, that's a very strange discrepancy of reality that brings with it like an elongation of tension, so that it almost just seems like you'd think it's at a buckling point, but it's like people have just fortified themselves and now we throw insults at each other from different perspectives. So it's like, I don't know how that evolves over time. Yeah.
well, people get back to their pattern of thinking. Like I had somebody recently where I was talking about something, and they're like, "Oh, that sounds like Alex Jones stuff," and I'm like, I'm like, Alex Jones was right about a lot of stuff, and then they immediately brought up, oh, like the Sandy Hook thing, and I'm like, like they act like his. First of all, this is the thing, and let me get this out of the way, because it is bothersome a little bit, because I feel like people have fallen for it. I mean, there's obviously a lot of tricks that are played, but this is one of the many that Alex Jones has become the Sandy Hook guy. Like that wasn't his claim to fame. Like that wasn't his, like it's not like he was the leading investigator, researcher, whatever. He was a guy, okay, because he's seen what he's seen. He's uncovered what he's uncovered. He had the balls to speak out when many people wouldn't, about many other things. Like, he talked about Waco. He openly talked about 9/11. He talked it. So, he talked about historically all the false flags that have happened and been proven. And, agent provocateurs, all these things. He's talked about all these things. And so he doesn't trust the government. He doesn't trust the media, and rightfully so. Nobody should. And then the Sandy Hook thing comes. There are some things that seemed very suspicious about it, just like every shooting in the US. The Texas shooting recently, it's in the news, right? And everybody's talking about, like, why did the cops stand down? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? Why did a parent get arrested and cuffed, but the cops didn't go in there and do anything? So all these things happen. The Vegas shooting. There's so many shootings that make very little sense, and there's suppressed information or a lack of information. So of course, the things that don't make sense, we're going to come up with our own theories, like why this could happen or why that didn't happen. So for him to just ask some questions, okay, he asked some questions, and maybe he was wrong, maybe he was right. I don't know. I don't honestly, like, I remember when the Sandy Hook thing happened, and being from Massachusetts and living pretty close to the border of Connecticut, that was one of those topics that people were like, they would get pretty heated about if you brought it up and even questioned it. But the ability to question it and not restrain yourself from saying this is so horrific, there everything must have happened the way they said. And as a parent, like, I could just imagine how fucking horrific it must be to, I mean, I can't even imagine losing a child. Like, I tried not to think about it because you just naturally get super emotional, and it's just like the saddest thing you could ever deal with. So I understand, like, okay, if you lost a child, how upset you would be if people are questioning what happened there. But you also have to see from the other perspective that the media lies. Your willingness to talk about the most controversial things and question the most controversial things is why that's what leads you down the path of uncovering some things that you weren't willing to accept the mainstream narrative, right? So it's like his willingness to question 9/11 immediately is how he was one of the first people to publicly, be outspoken and do documentaries or whatever. And sometimes you're going to question something and you're going to think, like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. There's might be more here. You might think because there's smoke, there has to be fire. And then you find out, okay, maybe this time I was wrong. But your willingness to follow that smoke to see where it takes you cannot be suppressed. And then you look at the fact that he was banned on every single platform. So we know there was some very high up people, powerful people, who colluded to suppress him and make him look like, a crazy person, which he does help with that pretty much. But so they colluded to take him off every platform, to basically kill his business. And then, the Sandy Hook thing happened, which it seemed like those things were happening in parallel, like they were happening around the same time, where now all of a sudden you're linking him to the Sandy Hook thing, right? And like he became the face of the Sandy Hook was a conspiracy club. And yet I'm like, okay, well, can't you see that because the same people that are trying to get him banned everywhere and did are the same people who are trying to link him to this and make this the face of his business, for lack of a better term. But yet you can't even verify it because they ban him off everything. So now he can't even defend himself, and he can't say, hey, no, like, I questioned it. Maybe I let some people on the show who were questioning it, but that's not my life's work. That's not the only topic I focus on. He historically, I think he's focused a lot more on being anti-war and anti-corruption. Really, I know he's been super soft in Israel, and that's something he gets a lot of critique for, and that, and I think rightfully so. He doesn't call out Israel ever for anything. But even if you disagree with him on the way he handles one thing, you have to at least give him credit for, 9/11 A Road to Tyranny was one of the first real documentaries that I'm like, holy crap. You had Loose Change, you had Zeitgeist, you had all these films that molded the way people, growing up in my generation, and we might be close in age, so similar generations, like, grew up, like, it molded the way we looked at the world and really red pilled us to a extent that basically helped us get ready for what we went through recently. Like, we were ready for it. There was nothing that was too crazy to believe when you've gone through this journey already of uncovering thing after thing after thing after thing, and you're like, wow, man, like, what are the limits to imperialism, to empire expanding, to new world order? What it just Yeah, I gave you a lot of shit again, and no questions at the end of here. I'm just kind of throwing shit out here. Hopefully you have something you could expand on. Do you have any thoughts on what's your opinions on everything I said? Do you agree with me, or feel free to disagree? I mean, I'm wrong all the time.
No, I mean, I agree insofar as people have the tendency to sort of just see the world according to the representations that famous figureheads have sort of championed of that idea. And so a lot of the time when we're talking about things, we aren't even really talking about the things, we're talking about our feelings about the people who talked about the things. And so it's just like, all right, so we're avoiding the conversation basically. And if you're trying to insist on having a conversation that another person is insisting on avoiding, it's just like a cat that has like a piece of toast with butter on it taped to its back so that it's just a perpetual motion engine and you're never going to go anywhere. And so we're also wrapped up in that. Like, I don't know, man. Major issues, especially because like I had an I don't think he was my uncle. It's like it's one of those through marriage relationships, but he was my godfather anyway. And he was at the Twin Towers when they got struck. He was down there and it happened and he's looking at it and he's like, holy shit. So like he got out of there because everyone else was kind of like sitting around looking at the thing. And it's kind of made it so that for the years afterward, it's like it's more of a personal connection. So you don't want to talk about it as much. And it's like, so I can understand that, how it inflames the sensitivities and makes it a little bit more of a precarious conversation. And then when you get people who are really like bombastic about it, which Alex Jones is, the dude's just like blow it up all the time for one thing or another. It's like that's the biggest disaster time bomb next to like our greatest sensitivity, and they're pissing each other off. Like that's obviously a recipe for disaster. So I can understand that in and of itself as like an alchemical like proxy. That's like a time bomb. Just looking at it, it's like, and then if they give that to everyone so that they take that time bomb in, of course they're going to learn to like push the information away. So it's kind of like that habitual entrainment of how we respond to conspiracy in a general sense that makes everyone who might actually be on board with what the sense that we're making just not want to talk about the conversation. You know, that whole thing. Yeah, it's a nightmare.
Well, it's funny as time has gone by. Like I've had a lot of guests on the show that say Alex has done more bad than good for the community, and yet it's like and I see those arguments, and at times counting on when in my life I'm doing these interviews, sometimes I'm like, you know what, I kind of agree. Like, and then there's other times where I think about it and I analyze it. I'm like, but how many people have gotten red pilled because of him?
Yeah.
It's like you can't take that away from it. And the other thing too is if you already believe in that things aren't what they seem, and you believe that false flags and government and media manipulation and social engineering, if you believe all these things exist, you listen to his show because you're getting that information that you want, that you already believe exists, but you're getting it in a entertaining manner. Where if you're going there just for the information, like you're all new to it, and it's coming out of the person who's sweating and screaming, then you'll be like, okay, he seems crazy. The things that he's saying seems crazy because I haven't discovered this yet. I haven't been red pilled yet. So this whole thing's just crazy. But if you've already been red pilled and you're like, okay, I think look at the success of Sam Tripoli. Everybody loves Sam Tripoli. He gets along with everybody. He's just a gem of a person. He helps out as many people as he can. He's a great guy, right? I mean, he's been on so many big shows, and he's all his shows do well, and he's worked his ass off to get where he is, and I think one of the reasons why people love him is because he could do a show like Tinfoil Hat, where he gives you a lot of the same information you might get from myself, or you might get from your documentaries or whatever. But because and actually, no, your show is actually very similar to his show. In regards to like, I think people like to be entertained and have a little bit of humor while getting that information. Like my show at times might be too dry for somebody, or might be too serious for somebody. Charlie, for example, like he loves OBDM, right? Like that's he openly says that's one of his favorite shows. The way we all got together was because I was interviewed on OBDM, and I knew of the show and whatnot, but I wasn't like a regular listener at the time. And the next day, Charlie emails me and says, "Hey, dude, you're just on my favorite show." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And then he's like, "Oh, the OBDM show." Because a lot of people in the alternative media community, like people like Charlie and myself, and like I didn't know that they listened to OBDM. That seemed like a little bit more comedic and supernatural. So I didn't know that was like his thing. And then I'm like, "Oh crap!" Like he loves OBDM. I'm like, "Let's all get together." And next thing you know, I started listening to OBDM, and I'm like, I get it. I'm like, I'm getting some of the interesting information that I like and I want to learn from, but nobody's taking it too seriously. And Sam's the same way. your show, Conspiracy Synergy, similar. Alex Jones, kind of the same way. Like it's never it's serious information presented in not always the most serious way. So it in a way it's harder to get blackpilled, right? Because it's like now I'm laughing while I'm hearing how horrendous things are. It's like it almost makes it easier to consume. Do you think that, I mean, and as somebody who, your show, I'm using your show as an example. Obviously, I mean, I would, and you've stated it, like it's obviously one of your ways of getting this information across, right? So, and do you think that that's a similar reason similar reason why Alex Jones has the success he has, similar type of technique of never being too serious, even though when he's getting really upset, you're like, okay, he's getting really upset. He's getting upset because he's really serious about this information. But I almost feel like he's okay with making a fool out of himself. I mean, some of the things he says, and the OBDM show does a great job of like using those little samples of just ridiculous things he says. Like he must know like that nobody's going to take him too seriously when he's acting like that, and that must be a part of his appeal, I assume.
So I guess to speak about the issue in the sense that I have more insight to it is as a performer. And that's because it's like I'm an artist first. So I'm writer, director, producer, editor, actor, illustrator. I've done a lot of voice acting and stuff like that. So anytime you're communicating anything, the thread's not necessarily of manipulation, but of speaking in earnest from a particular place that you're attempting to communicate. It's like that's very much a learned and refined thing. And so you can look at like psychopaths are the best at it because to them it's like every moment is an opportunity to play with another person's emotions, not to empathize with them. So it's like a very different skill set that you go about acquiring in the process of doing something. But if you think about what it is to be like the utmost empath, you're also able to isolate or dial down on cruelty because of your own sensitivity. So it kind of gives you both sides to the equation at once, learning on a broader spectrum of what it is to speak to people and what it is to understand what you're kind of like conveying to them through the tone of your voice, through your nonverbals, all these different things. And so like watching everyone's kind of performative nuance, like the way in which they simply either are themselves or they're trying to sell themselves, what it is they're trying to get out of it, what they're trying to make out of it, all of that kind of stuff. From a performative perspective, that's sort of like where I came from constructing my show. Because I'm like, all right, I've seen how everyone shows themselves, how everyone tries to show the information to everybody else. I've seen how everybody is so dialed into the idea of only wanting to get it shown to them in a certain way. And if it doesn't get shown to you in that certain way, then you're just like, oh, it's crazy, like you said, or it's like, oh, it's not entertaining enough or whatever. And that's what we've been dialed into because we've all been habitually entrained by watching all of these shows all the time. So the only thing we're really receptive to is the particular kind of show that shows us what we want to know in the way that we want it shown. It's fucking insane. But it makes sense at the same time because we've been learning from all of this stuff, all of these different art forms and all these different mediums. They've funneled into what it is for us to be people. And it's a really interesting soup to be swimming in because I can say something like a movie and you'll know what I'm talking about. And that's really powerful if you think about it. That's a meme in and of itself. So we're at a point where we have all of these nostalgic blocks that we can share, we can swap with each other to then get ourselves to a position where, once again, I think we're just trying to build common ground. And so it's like, that's what I've aimed to do sort of with the show that I'm showing people. But I think you're right that it's sort of just happening already with everyone because of the environment that we've been in with the internet the entire time. Yeah.
Well, it's funny how the way you present the information can be, it's so different, in regards to how people perceive it or enjoy it or don't enjoy it. There's this guy, I believe he has the biggest car review channel on YouTube. His name's Doug Demora, I think it's his name. He's actually quite fascinating. And he's one of those guys where I'm like, I bet you there's more beneath those layers. Like if I sat him down on a podcast, I'm like, he's more interesting than just a car reviewer on YouTube. Because what he did, right? And it's funny because apparently he gets a lot of hate because people will spend tons of money on like the best cameras, the best angles, drones, all this stuff to try to get like these amazing driving videos of the car that they're reviewing, all the stuff. And he literally just stands in front of a car and gives the car a Doug score. Okay. And he talks about the quirks of the car. And what he does, he has like a pretty good sense of humor. Like he never takes himself too seriously. He finds all these like really weird things about the car that most people wouldn't know unless you were driving it for a long period of time. Like there's something about like, when you own a car long enough, you're like, oh, I didn't know that button was there, or I didn't know the battery was over there, or I didn't know it had this, this secret compartment over here. And and those are all the things he kind of shows you, all those unique things that make the car different or special or unusual that another car reviewer would never spend the time to even comment on, never mind look for, because he would be too focused on like, oh, horsepower, look how well it handles, all this stuff. So, but it's funny, like he talks about how he gets a lot of crap because some of his interior videos he's done with his iPhone. And he's like, and he literally has the biggest car review channel on YouTube. So I remember like when somebody stated that it was the biggest, I knew it was very big. I didn't know it was the biggest, but so somebody on a podcast or interview or somewhere I heard like it was the biggest car review channel on YouTube. I started thinking to myself, I'm like, wow, man, like that's a perfect example of how we can completely overdo something with like quality of the content and in regards to like quality as in like video and audio, and maybe it's more about the quality of the content, like just what are you saying, what are you presenting, who are you as a person. Like there's all these other things that can be overlooked sometimes, and instead of like finding a clever way of doing something and putting effort and energy in that, right, we're spending more time like on the quality of something, the audio video quality. And yet like somebody can connect with this guy who gives a Doug score, which, I mean, how silly is that? Imagine coming up with that by yourself. I'm going to give it a Doug score. It's like and that's basically how he sounds when he says that. He's like, I'll give it a Doug score. It just sounds kind of silly, and yet it connects with people. And that's the thing. It's so, I remember when I was still on YouTube, sometimes you'd run into these channels and I'm just like, I'm struggling to get like 20,000 subscribers. I've been on YouTube for a long time. I put out, a decent amount of content, had like some pretty big names. And I'm just like, I don't even know if I made it to 20,000 subscribers before I got kicked off YouTube. And I'm like, I was on YouTube. I had my music on YouTube. That same channel had my music on years before. So I already kind of built it a little bit. And then once I started doing the podcast, it obviously started picking up much quicker. And I was one of the few people who stuck around a little bit longer. I was like one of the last during some of the moments where like all these people get banned, then all these people get banned in these groups. I stuck around. People are like, how are you still on? I'm like, I don't know. I know the day will come one day. So I know that helped quite a bit because people who were looking for stuff during the COVID lockdown, mine was probably one of the few channels that still existed that had people on, like I remember when I had Dr. Robert Malone on, I was still on YouTube. He emailed me the next day. He's like, how are you still on YouTube? And our interview's still up. I'm like, I don't know, man, I'm kind of going under the radar or something. And but I would find these other channels and I'm just, it'd be like the most ridiculous content ever. Like people who knows, just like being silly with their friends, or like, it looks like they put zero effort in coming up with something that's really interesting or thought-provoking, or like, I don't know. Like I'm like, I constantly go through imposter syndrome every time I do a podcast because I'm like, what do I have to say that's worth listening to? But these guys, like, literally, like, imposter syndrome is not in their vocabulary. Like they are just like, what, like, it just doesn't, they're openly and freely kind of just being themselves. And I think there's something like it. So my point is, like, I used to look at that stuff and almost get upset because I'm like, damn, I'm like, what we value today, like, what the fuck is it that we value? Like, I think there's a really valuable stuff out there. And I'm not just saying my show, I'm saying many shows out there, your show, many other shows that I think, should be the shows that, are getting thousands and thousands of downloads and views every episode. And then there's stuff out there that these guys are like literally celebrities, like huge celebrities that are invited to like the White House. They had like YouTubers at the White House with Obama. And I'm like, who are these people? And like literally, I had no idea who any of them were. I started watching their channels just to see, like, okay, maybe there's some really interesting people out there. I just haven't, I haven't explored yet. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like the most ridiculous stuff ever. And then I've come back around, and maybe it's coming with age, but I've like come back around where I'm like, who am I to say that person's content is any less valuable than my content? Like if somebody connects, it's almost like, and I'm bringing it back to like music and art, because nothing is more subjective than art, right? And in regards to like music and art, like you can get the purist, the amazing musician who can play every solo that Eddie Van Halen ever played, could play every solo that Iron Maiden ever played. Like they could, amazing musician in regards to ability to play, but couldn't write original song for his life. And and then or they do write a good original song, but it doesn't connect with you the same way as that guy who just picked up acoustic guitar, played it from his heart, maybe didn't have the most skill or ability to play the most difficult songs, but use his ability as his way, like whatever ability he did have, he used it to try to explore and share whatever emotions or story he was trying to share with the public. And so I'm kind of looking at YouTubers the same way, where like, okay, they're creators, right? We call them content creators. Like some of the songs that I connect with the most are songs that are the most easiest to play and perform. And if I was to be in a cover band, and yet like some of the songs that are some of the best musicians in the world, even though some of them do have some really good music, it doesn't necessarily always mean that it's the best song, right? So it's like when we create content, like that's something that we have to kind of take in consideration, is like, and as somebody who used to play a lot of music and thought a lot about, what made a good song, what made a song that you connect with, a song that you connected with, maybe, I should be looking at my podcast in the same way, right? Or when you do podcasts.
It's interesting because like it makes me think about if I had been growing up on the internet now and how awful that would be. Like because I think of things that I used to like write or create or whatever, and I was hoping that they'd be successful. But like looking back at that stuff now, I'm just like, damn, I'm happy that no one read that or knows that it exists, because creates a very different thing. So the idea of what's good or not, yeah, it's very much relative to where you're at in your own development as a content creator or as a person just trying to express yourself. And we're also brutal with each other when it comes to like reviewing one another's arts and opinions and everything. Like we're just brutal. And so like it's a tough environment. And that's why the idea of like coming up in it now, and it's a good perspective to bring to it, to look at everything as being every bit as legitimate as everything else, because what we've lost in all of this content that we're creating and sharing all the time is the feeling of human connection. And that's what we want, and that's what ultimately matters if it's there. And we're so wrapped up in each other's wrappers that we've kind of stopped paying attention to the facts of the matter as being the most important thing. So in the same way in which you talk about all these people getting sponsored to have all of these like likes and views and stuff, it's like they're not shadow banned, they're not deliberately being pushed under the radar in a variety of different ways. And so it's very difficult to reconcile the discrepancy between what is most important, what is human connection, and then what's wrapped up in a way and sold on a storefront that if you're not on, nobody's going to know to click, let alone to actually enjoy. And so I'm caught in the same place of wondering how to get out of that as people, because it's like real estate seems to be the most important thing that determines whether or not people get seen and whether they get appreciated, and whether we're able to make that human connection with the best humans that we want to connect to, rather than just finding ourselves on a storefront somewhere. And it's difficult for all of us because every new thing that comes out It's like a new issue that's branded in a new way. So you have an emotional attachment, even if you're trying to avoid it. It's an emotional attachment, and so like it never stops. And it's like finding the good people and the good conversations in the midst of all of that. It's like it feels like a little battle every day, just logging onto the internet. It used to be like the way in which you'd go to just like hang out with your friends, but now it's just like little eruptive landmines going up left, right, and center. So it's weird. It's quite the time to be alive online and looking at all the different stages that we're in, both having access to the internet and so too as people, just like putting ourselves out there.
Another thing I wanted to run by you was so this is another like kind of thought or some ideas that have been kind of going through my head. I heard on a recent interview or podcast, wherever, I don't know, I take in so much content, I don't know where I hear it.
Yeah, right.
But I remember but certain things will stick with me, right? And like somebody said, we put too much value in emotions, right? And how that's a problem, right? And so which led to this conflicting dilemma in my brain. As you can tell in most of my podcasts, I'm constantly like, there's just always like two sides to every perspective that are fighting in my brain. Because like in the middle of stating my point or my perspective, I will change it by the time I'm done with the sentence. I'll be like, you know what? I think, and this was kind of a similar thing where like, okay, emotions, they're important, right? It's what makes us human. It's what makes us appreciate and enjoy art, right? Like you connect with it emotionally. But have we gone too far where now it's like I want to be called he, she, her, whatever fucking pronoun it may be, and it's like those are my emotions, like you should value that. And now it's like, oh shit, like have we valued emotion too much and gone too far? So it's like, it's almost like, should we devalue emotions? But then I'm almost like being connected to it to some extent, like is why we enjoy art, right?
Well, it's an interesting idea. So like equating the idea of us having emotions for people who are identifying with a particular pronoun or something like that. I don't remember how he phrased it, but one of Dave Chappelle's like jokes on the matter had to do with you have every right to identify in the way that you do, but it becomes a problem when your expectation is that I go along with it. And that's not unrealistic insofar as our considerations are concerned, but our constant attention, it's just like eventually you reach a point where it's just like this is ridiculous. And so it's like, yeah, it's really difficult to calibrate the line between the principles that we should all stand for and stand upon versus how we feel about it when times get harder, when we don't feel as if we're getting the fair representation. Because in those situations, yeah, you do just kind of want the people who are just like overly emotional about it to kind of shut up a little bit, because it's just like, okay, it's one of those things where there are aspects where it does benefit you to have select calluses, not to be calloused, but in certain parts of yourself. That's an important part of what it is to handle reality responsibly. So it's a balancing thing. Yeah.
Now, do you think that this is a part of is it a part, is this something organic, or do you think it is a part of the end game, right? Like, because one thing you said that I think so important is that people don't realize how bad things really are. And we've been so that's such a really really good point, because I've been trying to find a way to like express that point and in a way that could get people to understand like, hey, there's stuff happening, there's people who are trying to figure out every way possible to control your life and you know, give themselves more power and resources and control all aspects of your life. And it's like when we're distracted and we have our lives back in regards to our kind of freedom or some type of freedom to enjoy our lives and be distracted, then we forget all that stuff's going on. And it's almost like nobody knew how bad things were until eventually it became so obvious that it halted us from being distracted. And then the only distraction was how bad things are. And I almost feel like it's happening again, right? Like we're back to being distracted and forgetting that at at one point, it was so obvious that people are trying to control us and people are trying to restrict your freedoms and people are trying to psychologically damage you. And yet, like, you think those people just went away? Like, now that you're distracted again, like, it's almost like, it's like you think, you know, Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates and all these people who became household names in regards to, like, you know, controlling people and being very sketchy, and words like eugenics became more relevant to people and more common in the vocabulary. Like, all these things that seem too crazy to believe. Like, I think in 2020 and 2021 and even now, like, people are becoming much more skeptical of our leaders, the experts, of what science really is. You know, how easily data or you know, information can be manipulated for other people's agendas. And yet it's like, okay, those people are still here. Just because now you're distracted and you're not following their plans or what they're doing on a daily basis, like, they're still here and they're still trying. Those agendas still exist, and there's a concern about, like, people, again, like, it's, and I hate to be like, you know, sounding kind of black pilled, but like you said, people aren't paying attention to how bad things really are, which means, are we open to the possibility of something like COVID happening again to kind of put nitric oxide, you know, to the whole agenda, and, like, just fast forward ahead? Some people have said that they think that they didn't win, that we won because they didn't achieve all the things they wanted to achieve. But I'm like, you psychologically damaged people. You have people who lost their businesses. You have kids that were I'm positive we're not sure of what psychological damage this will all cause in the future, and might never be normal human beings or adults because of it. You have people who lost their businesses, people who are struggling to pay their bills, people who became addicts, people who were addicts who just got worse. Like, all this stuff happened. Yeah, maybe they didn't inject as many people as they wanted, but boy, I don't feel like we won, you know?
No,
Like,
no, not at all. Because I find it helps to elongate time and view it as a bar fight. It's like they got a really good right hook in. In fact, they got like 10 of them over and over again. As we kind of like said, oh, okay, I can understand the first 2 weeks, but you're still hitting me. And we'd basically just lay there and took it. And then every once in a while, we'd kind of like wriggle around a little bit and pretend that it meant something, but we didn't ultimately ever get off the floor. And now that they've stopped pummeling us horribly, we're like, we won. We're like, no, we didn't. We're just not all dead. It's like we went through a horrible, deliberately traumatizing event that bludgeons you over a long enough period of time where you don't understand that you just got your ass kicked. And so, yeah, that's what we're coming out of, and it's going to happen again. And chances are it's going to be worse. And it's not just going to be one guy; it's going to be 10 of them. And it's like, how do you rally people around the situation like that without them feeling blackpilled, as you put it? It's like, I think that once we understand that so much of this is our focus and where we put it, in every day it's going to be less and less built around the infrastructure, which is still likes and views and shares, and it's going to become more, where are we actually going in our own community, because that's still not the thing that we're doing. And I'm not necessarily prescribing it or recommending it, because right now, while the internet's still around, that's still going to be kind of our jungle gym, and it's important because it's a way of disseminating things. But at the exact same time, at the end of the day, you really are either putting more of your focus into the digital or more of your focus into the real. And that's one of those sort of wake up calls that I think is going to kind of like slowly dawn on us more and more the further we move into this, either continuing to happen, happening again, or with the trauma of what everyone's been through the first time around. Yeah.
do you think the I've kind of thought, as you can tell, I keep saying I've thought a lot about, I've spent a lot of time thinking, as you can tell, but not that it makes me any smarter, but it just but it's because I never really come to any conclusions. It's just always just like thoughts kind of swirling around and kind of you know, just entertaining one idea and then another idea. But this, I are you familiar with Alexander Dugin? I don't know if we've talked about him specifically, but so he's a very fascinating Russian philosopher, and he's very influential in Russia. He's very influential in Putin, and it's his worldviews or whatever. And Michael Millerman, Professor Michael Millerman, who's actually from Canada, and he was on my show recently, and I got, so all these guys are connected. Like Michael Millerman, I got exposed to Michael Millerman by another Michael, a Greek Michael, who did a great YouTube show called Ancient Greece Revisited, and he has a podcast called the On Tyranny podcast, which is actually named after a Leo Strauss book. And so I got exposed to him, and then he came on my show, and then I got really fascinated with his work. His work led me to Michael Millerman, and Michael Millerman led me to Alexander Dugin. And so Michael Millerman from Canada, he was a professor at some university, got in trouble because he translated Alexander Dugin to English, and one of the first people to take his book on the fourth political theory and all these other really interesting books that he has, and translate them. And then he eventually, they pigeonholed him and basically got him fired or whatever. And but Leo Strauss and Alexander Dugin have this theory that the West is that the East, Russia specifically, is actually fighting back against the progressive ideologies that are kind of infiltrating, Western culture, so in the US, and then you see it happening in Western Europe, obviously Canada, and a lot of Western culture, this idea of you're trying to demolish religion. And not so much, I don't know if it's a battle specifically on religion, but on maybe what religion and spirituality can bring in regards to values, right? Because when you think about it, a lot of people would turn to religion or some holy book for values. If you don't have that, then who decides what's right and wrong? The state, the government, and a lot of this even goes back to the Enlightenment, Leo Strauss and Alexander Dugin talks about how the Enlightenment brought in basically the beginning of what became progressive thinking and scientists, the scientific perspective of the world, and not believing in anything supernatural and any of that stuff. And so the elimination of religion and which happened, after, or at least it wasn't, it was devalued after the Enlightenment, led to where we are now. And does that make sense to you? Is that something that you think, it was a part of the plan, this idea of making us more materialistic in regards to the way we look at the world, don't believe in things that are supernatural, don't believe in things that are spiritual, don't believe in a higher power, because what it does, it devalues our existence, it devalues us. It means that instead of us trying to live a life that, because if you're religious, you're living a life for God or for Jesus or for whoever, you're living a life that you believe they're going to judge, or you live a life that you want them to appreciate, or live a life that you think they want you to live, but it gives you some type of guidelines and moral compass. If you eliminate that, then the elite can kind of create the moral compass and manipulate the moral compass, and you go to them for the moral compass. So the state becomes the new religion. Is that something you would subscribe to? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense as far as a prolonged social engineering agenda in order to hijack what we think of as moral, and then to at first graph that to a theologian perspective, which was itself entwined with dictatorships, basically, that were entwined with the church. And so the shareholding that the elite have always had in the perspective of what people think of as moral has always fluctuated at any given time, but it's always been deliberately to consolidate people under what I call excuses umbrellas. Like the government is the excuse umbrella. It's like if you do any of that shit when you're not under the excuse umbrella, you're going to prison for a very long time. But if you're wearing the excuses umbrella, man, you can do whatever you want. And it's kind of like the Sistine Chapel. A big part of what funded that into existence was funds from something called indulgences. And indulgences were basically things that were signed off by the Pope to forgive rich people for their sins. So it's kind of always existed at one point or another, a way of people who want to create a particular environment that corrupts our perspective on what is moral and what is just, while simultaneously presiding over an inner sanctum that for them allows them to get away with whatever they want. So it isn't just like poisoning our perspective on it. It's that when they do that, they can almost like walk right past us, like we don't even exist, because they're under the excuses umbrella. And that makes it so that it's easy to plan those really long kind of like co-opting of society that way, because it keeps happening. It's like, I swear to God, there's probably like a spreadsheet you could look at and just be like, okay, here's the pie chart. This is when human beings snap and they go from being like completely suppressed to this next level. They probably can almost look at it like they're cooking with a stew. You know, it's like they're tasting, it's like needs more salt, needs a little bit more torture. It's like, oh, this guy's speaking a little too much. It's like, I'll just cut him into smaller pieces. You know, it's like, so at what point is it an art and is it a science? I think it's actually certain levels and layers have it down to such a degree that it's like baffling and borderline impossible for us. That's like the occult science level. But then there's like the front end dipshits who are like the politicians, who are just kind of like toys, and they're there to like dress it up and make it look different. So there are all those different layers to it. So yeah, I foundationally agree with your assessment and your conclusions and about what's been done to our moral perspective and how it's been built around society at large and where it's put us in the contemporary and all the different threads that it ties to religion and the contemporary Church of Science and all of it. So yeah, I think that's accurate. That's how it works. It sucks.
Do you think we need religion for our morals?
I think that's the idea that was tied into religion, so that we would think of it as if it was synonymous with morals. What we need for morals is an understanding of the objective difference between right and wrong. And so that's something that you can articulate completely independent from religion. It's spiritual, technically, because that's an understanding of that side of reality in a way in which you're able to actually build it as more of a science. Religion has brought that science to us through the metaphor, and sometimes those metaphors may actually be literal. Like some people are like, Jesus absolutely lived, and other people are like, no, he absolutely did not. I'm like, I don't really care, because either way, it's more or less the same thing at this current juncture in history, which is that it's telling a story of what we should ascend to and what the best version of ourselves is, and the merits and significance of objective truth, and how important it is to be a good, courageous, conscientious, decent human being. Who cares if it's a story or not? It's one we should live by. And so it's one of those things where we get like wrapped up in the semantic of the vessel in which it's been given to us in the historical sense, which is religion, and we're less able to see simply the merits of the teachings. And the merits of the teachings are what's most important. And if Jesus were around, he'd probably be saying something similar himself about, hey, the stuff I'm talking about, that's what's most important. Don't create a religion out of me, you know, something like that. But I'm not very good at paraphrasing the dude.
Yeah, it's weird because it's like the argument that without religion, it's almost like in theory, it's like, oh, you wouldn't have all these battles and wars and people disliking each other. But are most of the time, if not all the time, those are really not because of religion. It's because people are using religion as a tool to get one group of people to hate another group of people.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. So like what people call religious wars, I mean, how many of them, and I'm sure they're out there, but how many of it is because some leader is like, I can convince this group of people to hate those group of people, and really it's about resources or the land, or just I want to be the leader of the dominant people. It's not about really like the message or the holy book or defending that religion, you know, at least in modern times or modern history, I would say. Maybe if you go back far enough, you could find, you know, battles where it really was about like, hey, we hate them because their religion is different than ours. But I think in modern times, I mean, just thinking about like modern history, you know, you could almost find that it's, here's a perfect example, because we brought up 9/11 briefly. The 9/11 hijackers, right? Muslim extremists, but they were like doing coke and going to strip clubs before they, it's like, that doesn't sound like extremism. I'm like, I know moderate Muslims who don't do coke and go to strip clubs. So if they're extreme Muslims, then, I'm a little confused on what a extreme Muslim is, because, it doesn't sound like they were motivated by, hating what, some people would say is a Christian nation or whatever it may be.
Yeah, so like that makes me think of kind of like what you were talking about earlier with that we do too much emotion. And it's just because all of these things are really just labels that we have a superficial and emotional association with. So that it's like someone describes something to you, they're not even describing the person. They're like, here are all these emotional labels that you have preconceived ideas about. Sort that out and come to an assumption within 3 seconds flat. And we're doing it constantly. So it's like, yeah, at this point, so when I do my protesting thing like every Saturday, I'm by this sign just hanging out there for like 4 or 5 hours or whatever, talking to people. And every single time I'll have a different religious extremist of one variety or another trying to like talk to me about all this. I'm like, all right, I'm happy to talk to you. But they're always trying to convert me into a very particular interpretation. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't work out so well for them. I had one lady literally do a prayer in tongues over me. That was funny. So it's just like saying gibberish and doing hand gestures. And I'm like, okay, I'm not sure how it works when you reach that point of gibberish hand gestures over another person to try and rope them into your belief system. But a lot of it feels like that, and that's because those are the emotional associations. And some people actually live those emotional associations. If you haven't met a Scientologist, you have a particular idea about a Scientologist. Maybe you've only been watching Tom Cruise movies. Maybe you've had a really great time with that. That is not how the reality is going to stack up. And the more you look into the weird religious side of stuff, you can look at what's coming out of Utah right now with all the accusations of sexual abuse for years and years. The 10% that was in the Roman Catholic Church that was responsible for child abuse. That was actually how often it was. It was 1 in 10. And so it's like this is entire subsections of reality that if you get into their followers and their cults and like it's monolithic gigantic movements that are just like trudging over reality left, right, and center. And it's like each of them has their own language. And so, yeah, we look at it as like a superficial emotional association. For them, it's their entire worldview. And then there's all this weird, murky reality swimming in between that kind of pinhole view that we have and the sordid mess that's actually going on. It's a trip, dude. Like I've had to look into like Zionism and the Vatican Bank a bunch for this new episode, and it's just like it's all so corrupt. It's brutal. It's just oh, you want to be depressed for a few months? Watch that stuff or read that stuff. Yeah.
It's funny because one of the movies I've recommended the most that gets into antidepressants and the history of it and how flawed the science is in antidepressants is. It's called, I think it's Making a Killing, and then it's the history of antidepressants and all that stuff and the DSM. And I remember one of the many times I shared it, somebody wrote me and they're like, hey, that was that documentary was funded by like Scientology. And I'm like, bullshit. I'm like, I know some of the speakers on in that documentary. I know some of the doctors that are in that documentary. I know some, I'm like, it's been around forever. I'm like, it doesn't seem like, and then like I looked into it and it was some front group that was linked to Scientology. And I'm like, oh, that's weird, but I'm like, but they make a really good fucking point in regards to DSMs. Like, I might not agree with their solution, but I agree with their issues with it. And and then it kind of leads you down this road of like, okay, well, it is some type. And the other thing, like there's a podcast that Rogan did recently that I have to kind of re-listen to. It's like this guy, his name's like Mark Anderson no, it's not Anderson, but it kind of looks like Anderson. But he was like one of the like first guys to come up. He was a part of like the whole cyber community who was helping with internet and email and all this stuff, like this really tech savvy guy and one of the pioneers and godfathers of the whole thing. And they were talking about how humans naturally it's like as much as you try to force them or remove it from their way of life. Humans are more than just tribalistic. They will eventually create a religion, and it doesn't matter if you're talking about atheism. It doesn't matter if you're talking about scientism, whatever it may be. Like, they're all religions, and you create a culture, you create a community, it becomes an ideology that you defend. um and it's like they were talking about how it's almost unavoidable, right? Like, it almost seems like you could try to remove all religion from the face of the earth. Eventually you end up finding yourself in one. You will end up creating one, and not even know it. And it's like fundamentally a part of our human nature, which makes me think, like, okay, is it necessary to exist? Like, or are these questions of, because I feel like they go hand in hand, and maybe, let me know if you think I'm wrong or you disagree, but like, don't you think they kind of go hand in hand with those bigger questions? Like, I think what's in our nature is maybe asking those bigger questions, like, what happens after death? Why are we here? Like, and some type of religion, at least the traditional ones, are not so much scientism and stuff like that, because I think they're trying to prevent you from asking those bigger questions. But like the traditional religions, they, like, something like those traditional religions will always exist because there are always going to be a group of people who will ask those bigger questions and look for those greater answers, and not believe that things are just materialistic, and what I see and hear and feel and smell and taste is basically reality, and there's nothing more. So it's almost like you can't. So one, I guess, a question for you, like, do you think that, like, it's, you couldn't eliminate all religion, which kind of makes me think, in a way, it's almost a optimistic way of looking at the way this might all end, because religion goes hand in hand with asking those bigger questions, which means you can't convince the whole public to become materialistic and become, um, you know, socially engineered to just go to make the state our religion. Or do you think that, the state does become the religion, and we think we're in this religiousess world, but what they're really doing is just converting us from that religion to their religion?
So it's kind of a lot of at the same time. I guess I'll describe my kind of felt sense of the landscape, kind of in the sense of the spiritual inclinations and curiosities that we have inherently as a part of ourselves when we're incarnate in this realm. That's not going to go away. That's why we have a tendency to create religion, because we're intuitively reaching towards something, or turning within ourselves to find like our memory or our own intuition or the art, or if we did a bunch of mushrooms, maybe we're tripping on that, and all of a sudden that'll become a part of a religion. So it comes from the very gnosis of what it is to exist. And that's always going to be there. It's always going to be reaching out for that thing, which is the future beyond ourselves that we have yet to realize. Now, religion is, in essence, in the contemporary, derived from the astrotheological cults that preceded the emergence of the big three contemporary monotheistic religions. And so that's Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And that's more of like a stopper device that's inserted into a point of approximate but not complete and detailed understanding of what's in that area, in order to keep you from fully developing your sense of spiritual self and moving beyond that stopping device. That's why Passio makes the contention that the etymology of religion is religare, which is to bind or to hold back. I've also heard the exact opposite interpretation, that it's more about bolstering and supporting your understanding. And that's why the esoteric can look at the description for something like the Bible as both the lock and the key. It gives you the key to understanding this intermediary area between spirit and what we're reaching for, which we can call God, but then it all locks you away with it because you're still in that same stopper area. And so the gradual erosion of the contemporary of religion is our inserting our individual understanding, which we come to over the course of our pursuits as we're searching through that spiritual place. And there's been a lot of that going on with the species. It's a precise and refined like spiritual science that you can then look at like Casey and Steiner and anthroposophy and a variety of other insights into. And we're at kind of the point where we're trying to figure that out, broaching between what the religions we created when human nature was bound to us not understanding, to where we're at in the contemporary of attempting to relay that understanding and narrow it down and not be bound up in the religious superstition that's almost kind of like the backwash of the days that we're coming out of, while simultaneously not being so new age that we throw a lot of things seemingly unnecessarily in the trash. So it's like, it's a really interesting kind of like period of transition from what has been religion to more of like a transcendental argument, kind of like philosophical framework of understanding that yes, this thing is real. What the shit is it exactly, and what language can we use to describe it accurately while not betraying the tradition or getting wrapped in it, up in it. That's kind of my whole 2 cents on where we've been and where we're going with it.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's why do you think that religious people seem to, when you look at like the whole COVID lockdown, and not just religious but spiritual people, it seemed, and from my experiences, it and the people I've connected with, it seems like the people who are religious or spiritual, they were much harder to trick. Like they believed in the greater conspiracy more often than the average materialistic person. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's, just I would always repeat that it's almost like their understanding of good versus evil, and if you believe in some internal greater good, then you must believe that evil exists also, which makes it easier for you to believe that somebody could do the horrible things that people have done. Like I feel like the average person had a hard time believing that they would approve a vaccine for 5 months old and toddlers and babies that they knew, like that's the part that they would have a hard time to struggle with. It's like, you're telling me that people know for sure that some kids are going to die or have health issues and they're doing it anyways. And I would be like, yeah. And you could just tell like they couldn't grasp that, but it seemed like spiritual religious people could grasp it a little bit easier. What do you think that is?
I think it's a combination of, one, they had a story that had been told to them that allowed them to perceive the reality in advance. A lot of what people do and how we respond to things are the stories that we've been told that sort of prime us for our response. Now, if you're going to meet a new person and you hear all kinds of awful stuff about them, you're going to be like, oh, I hate that person already. I can't believe they suck that bad. It doesn't necessarily factor into what's really happening. But if you're told an accurate story about something that then begins to accurately happen in that way, it seems prophetic when really it's more just like you're aware of the situation of what's really going on. And so it's a combination of kind of both things. And at the same time, if you look at more of like the secular perspective and where our storytelling comes from, it is the state. And it's those who have been instated by the state as the experts who reiterate and in the process of that indoctrinate everyone who continues to listen to them every day. So are we getting our story from an ancient story that primed us to react in a particular way of recognizing the apocalypse as in the unveiling of the truth? Or are we getting our story from the state who's trying to just say nothing to see here, roll up your sleeve again? And that's kind of like the divide between perspective that each of these things has primed us for. And what I find is really interesting is trying to figure out the objective reality kind of like mixed and muddled in between the two, because we all have these tombs that we're using as a point of reference for how we dive into a subject. But just because that gives you great insight, and here's like a perspective from the esoteric again. And the esoteric, like, knowledge is described as fruit because it's only ripe for a time. If you have a map of something, it's pretty important to understand like when the map is, because that mountain might be a lake, depending. So it's pretty important for us to move into any given situation with knowledge that is ripe for the time. So a lot of people who look at their story in any given moment, if it's a story that's constantly being rewritten, either in the translations of the Bible or in the unfolding of the narrative in the contemporary, it's never completely accurate. So we're always so wed to these very particular, like, it's like if you've seen Spider-Man, you don't want someone telling you that a different version of events happened in the movie. It'll just piss you off. Now think of that and translate it to people's religions and the things that they're using to try and navigate whether or not they get to their destination, trying to decipher between land and water along the way. So it's like the stories that we're told and that we sort of like expose ourselves and other people to, so much of not what's happening, but our reaction to it is controlled through that. And so that's my kind of like 2 cents on like the different views and how people came to them and how that's been unfolding in the contemporary.
That's so interesting. I like that idea of like a map and how it's an example of how that information is important at that moment. And then, I mean, it's also the way you connect to it too. Like, there's something about it, interpretations of things and living in the moment. Like there's slang words now. Like if you're young, you use the word lit. Like that's lit. I
What is
remember
that?
you never heard that. That's
I don't hang out with young people, man. I don't
oh,
know
you
what's
don't?
going on in their world.
Yeah, well, they say I play basketball with some younger people, and I also have like cousins and nieces that are a little bit younger. So I remember the first time I heard them say that's lit. I'm like, how does that even make sense? But then I'm like, I grew up in an era where they used to say that's fat, and I'm like, that didn't make any sense either. So it's like, but it almost, and I'm finding like what an incredibly ridiculous way of relating to what you're saying, but it, it's funny because if you don't live in that generation or that time, your ability to relate to something in that time and that would be much harder. Was it it's some recently I was hearing how our interpretation of the way people spoke in certain eras or in certain like is completely off. Like there are just some people who are arguing like that's not the way they sounded at that time or whatever. And then it just makes us think like there's things that we are translating. There are things that we are rereading. And if you didn't live in that moment to understand what they meant by what they said, then our interpretation could be way off. Sometimes we read quotes from Mark Twain or whoever, some old poetry, some old whatever, and it's like okay, this is how I'm interpreting this. This must be what they were trying to do or trying to present. And it's like now it's like you almost rethink that. It's like, well, I could be completely misinterpreting it, because I can't relate to what it was like at that time or what maybe the way you said saying this in that time meant something slightly different than saying the same thing now, and it's no different than like translating languages from one language to another. Like sometimes people would be like, oh, how do you say this in Portuguese? And I'm like, I don't know. Like I'm not sure if there's exact translation in and there's a lot of that where just like there's not a perfect translation. I can tell you like maybe what could be somewhat the equivalent of it, but it's like there's not a exact translation. So that also could reflect the way we look at old thinkers, old philosophy, old and not to bring up Michael Millerman again, but that's something we talked about when he was on the show, was this idea like people who studied Leo Strauss had a interpretation of like Pluto and the Republic and all these old things that you felt like, okay, we all kind of agree on what it meant and what we agree like this is their philosophies and the way they looked at the world. And then you have somebody who comes from a different background and all of a sudden their translation is completely different, and you're like, oh my god, this gives me a whole different perspective on who they were as a philosopher and what their ideas were. So it's like so much of it's like just perspective. It's just and so many things that we commonly agree on, like, oh, this book is about that, or this is it's like we could be completely off. And I don't even know what my point is. I'm just pondering on things, I guess.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. And as far as I don't remember the exact quote because I'm kind of like you, had taken some information. It could be hard to pin down. I think it's one of the classics, but it was talking about like, um, if you have a book that's read by 100,000 people, you have 100,000 different books, and
I
it's
like
just,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. That's just how it works. And so that's kind of what I was talking about with earlier in the conversation, us trying to find some sense of normalcy, because normalcy of perspective is almost like the precursor to how you approach any situation. Like if you know you're going to go to a funeral, you're going to be acting a particular way. It's like the world's kind of, once again, like we talked about a year and a half ago, it's like we're at a funeral, but it's like we don't know how to act, and we don't know how to update, and like what time we're in, or what's going on, or what direction we're supposed to be moving together. And so everyone almost feels like their toes are constantly being stepped on, because we're all playing to different music on a dance floor together. And it's like, that's why it's so important to know the now. If you think of like the trivium and quadrivium pairing, the insight that music offers us is the metric of time. It's so that you're exactly on point with your timing, you're hitting exactly in accordance with the mathematics, and if you're off even a little bit, everybody knows it. So it's really, and then I'm reading this other book about sonic warfare, and it's really interesting because it goes into like using that as a technique of manipulation. And you can look at like water resonance and all that kind of stuff in certain frequencies and the shapes that it takes. But they're giving the example of like the Israeli military doing sonic booms over top of the Palestinian population at night in order to torture them, just because it screws with their sleep schedule. And so they're all, and then we can think of like the Apocalypse Now presentation of playing Flight of the Valkyries a mile out in order to ramp up the fear for when you actually hit them. And then also like the decibels that things are recorded at, mumble rap being the idea of like destroying the lyrics and the nuance of what we're communicating for the sake of just like decimating our receptivity to syllables. There are all these kind of different layers to all of it. So it's just like, yeah, it's a trip, man. The more in which we stumble into those things, the more in which we find stuff like sticking out of us that we didn't even realize we were tripping into. And that's kind of like my experience of it.
Well, my theory on mumble rap is that I think most people think they like lyrics, and that's why they like a song, because they care about the words and what it means. And the truth is, they just like the beat and the melody.
Yeah.
And mumble rap is like literally you're just basically mumbling to like a catchy melody, and you're not even really saying anything. And people, I remember that song Panda. I remember we used to go out, nobody knew the fucking words to it. And when I'd be out with my buddies, and it's funny because like my buddy who liked the song the most was like this big, tall, really smart looking, like I'd say looks like a CPA because he is a CPA, Polish kid, and all of a sudden, and wearing a button up, like just dressed very, just typical, like no, doesn't seem like he would like mumble rap, just put it that way. And next thing you know, we're out and Panda comes on and he's on the dance floor like mumbling because nobody knows the words. So but we all know they say panda with the part where he says panda, and it's like, but everybody loves it. And it's like, yeah, nobody cares what he's saying. It's just about the melody. And a little bit's also just like enjoying something together, like everybody knows one part of the song, everybody knows when he says panda, so everybody says it together, so everybody's kind of enjoying this moment together. That was kind of like, it's funny because it's similar to like trance music and house music. Like I used to love going out to places to play trance and house, and those were always like, when I was going out, like I had friends that liked to, the DJs that would play top 40 stuff, and I'm like, no, I'm more in the house, I'm more in the trance. And there's something about getting caught up in the moment, right? Where like nothing matters. You're just like enjoying the music, you're listening, you're almost like in a daze almost, right? You're dancing, you're in a daze, maybe you're with an attractive girl if you're lucky, and you're having fun, you're in the moment, you're having drinks, and nothing else in the world matters. And it's funny because looking back at like that type of lifestyle, right? We're just like, sometimes you're just like, dude, like there's more to the world than just getting messed up and living in that moment. But then it's like, is there, something in that moment, it's like nothing else matters. And maybe that's the truth. Maybe it's because and this goes again to like, we're talking about devaluing, maybe we should devalue emotions. Maybe, that's an example of how we shouldn't. Maybe we should just let our emotions let us enjoy the moment. And and maybe that's what it's about. Life's about that experience, living in that moment. And if you're happy and you're enjoying yourself and you're connected to the song and the energy in the room and maybe some other people you're with, then does what is happening in the rest of the world like matter in that moment? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's what matters, like having moments like that. And so it's like, yeah, I mean, everything we're talking about is always about a balance, right? Because it's like too much of that could be bad, but too much of going down rabbit holes and being stuck in rabbit holes for too long and not enjoying those moments is bad too.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a difficult balancing act when you're not just juggling chainsaws already, but life's throwing them at you along the way. And so it's kind of being on the ball. I don't know. I think that still means you're going to land on your ass every once in a while. That's been my experience of it anyway. And it's like trying to learn from the ball enough to bounce back rather than just fall flat. It's a tough situation as far as like finding those moments when you're just enjoying listening to the music. I guess it's because of the way you described it. It's the beat drop, and when everyone knows that it's happening at the same time, that's the thing that makes them feel included. I saw this one thing a while back, and it might have just been like a TMZ story, but it was a dude who like he got the beat drop wrong in a song, and everyone laughed at him. And then he was like suing them for emotional damage, and I'm like, oh man. So it's like, yeah, that's the thing that we're kind of looking for is like whatever it else is making someone else's heart beat in the same way that yours is, and then connecting in that. And so the ideal is if we can find a way to move that dance floor to something that's helping us overcome the real world responsibilities that we return to when we're not dancing. And it's really difficult to do because it's like they try and keep those two feelings separate from one another. I think there is actually technically some way to get us all out there feeling that much and enjoying it that hard when we aren't escaping from reality. So it's like it makes me think like what are the conjoined like potlucks, probably something like that. That's one, other things about building community, a lot of the stuff that churches have done, but then that gets wrapped up in the other things that they've done, and it's really difficult. So it's like, yeah, it just makes me think about the whole thing and what it is we value. Is it just the experience in the moment, or is it what those moments are building to? And it's hard.
But the experience in the moment, right? It, it's weird, right? Because when you're young, how many young people get told by their elders, their parents, whatever, like you don't know what love is, and it's like, wait, if and and like I look at like my first like real heartbreak, right? And I look back at it, I'm like, okay, I was an idiot. I was like super depressed, and it was like the end of the world. And looking back, you reflect on, you're like, it wasn't the end of the world, but at that moment, it was the end of my world, and it was the biggest, most important thing to me. And who who am I to say that, you know, that's less valuable or it's less important than somebody else's struggles? Like, okay, now because I'm an adult and I have different type of issues and struggles, like paying the bills or whatever it may be, then then like why, if there's a important scale, why is that more important than somebody who's emotionally heartbroken? And so it's like we pick and choose like what we value more or less. But then you see adults and it's like, like just because you've lost your capability to love a little bit, which I think is what happens when you get older, like I feel like it's almost like it's super easy to love when you're young, which is why we fall in love so quickly, because we don't have. And this goes to something that I keep saying on the show recently, because I think it's you're seeing it happen. When you that saying, if you're not a liberal when you're young, you don't have a heart. If you're not a conservative when you're old, you don't have a brain. And one of the reasons why I think that transition happens a little bit for some people, and it's not like I'm not saying somebody's a hardcore liberal and then they go extreme conservative, but I think you see a little bit of wherever you are, you end up going a little bit, maybe you're a little bit more left when you're young, and then when you get older you go a little bit right, on some things. And I think it's because of what's important to you, right? Like when you're young, government overreach, how much you get taxed, how expensive things are, isn't that important to you? Because like the economy doesn't affect you that much. Your parents feed you, they shelter you. You're probably, if you have a job, you're probably not making a lot of money anyways. So all that type of, you don't have, you're not 100% free anyways, because if you live with your parents, they have some restrictions on what you can and cannot do. So those type of issues, government overreach, taxation, the economy, like not really that important. And as you get older and you become a homeowner, or even if you're renting, or you own a car, you're paying for fuel, you're working full time and you're getting taxed. Like all of a sudden those issues that weren't that important become important, right? And so I think that's one of the reasons why the transition happens. But it's almost like we've decided as a culture that those issues are more important than the other issues of, like, of discrimination, liking, falling in love when you're young, living in the moment, caring about other people's feelings. And but again, this goes to where, like, they take a good thing and then they go to the extreme and it becomes a bad thing, because it's like, in theory, it seems like, yeah, that's not evil or bad. But then you go to the extreme where, like we're talking about now, you have people who are walking on eggshells in offices because God forbid you offend somebody, and then you have H&R calling you, into their offices or whatever. So it's like, I can kind of see the conservative perspective of like stopping a wuss, but I also see the more emotional perspective of like, stop pretending you don't have emotions, and just because you're not connected to it, or you neglect them, or because you pretend they don't influence your thinking and perspectives, it doesn't mean it doesn't. It just means that you're kind of in a way in denial, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know what you mean. And it's really difficult to calibrate to what people are feeling and how hard it is for them at a moment. Like if I see a kid and their bubble bursts and they spend a day crying about it, I'm going to giggle. I'm not going to giggle at them because I'm not going to laugh at their pain, but the bubble bursting is not in fact the last bubble that ever existed, and your life is not actually ruined. So kids will have meltdowns over things, and that just kind of happens, and we kind of laugh about it once you've been through some hard knocks. But at the same time, it's like you could really empathize in that moment and like go through the motions of bleeding empathetically. But if you're hanging out with children a lot, you're just not going to make it. So it's like there's kind of just like that dial adjustment that we all do with ourselves and with one another. And I think that society's in a weird place because it's set the dial in a cold place that negatively affects us all, but it's also given us not necessarily realistic models of what it is to empathize, because it's like I don't know what the social framework of development for empathy looks like, other than like the predictive programming matrix and like the compulsory school system, and then whatever you're exposed to with your parents, and then like the clubs that you go out into and everything. But I'd be really interested, not knowing this, to see the statistics and how it affects people with all of those different kind of influences stacking up on them. Because it's like it's a very interesting question. What is the appropriate amount of calibration for emotional stimuli when it could be anywhere versus a child to an adult reacting to something, and then all of us being kept in a perpetual state of almost childhood in our emotional responses to everything, as that's how the battlefield of war is increasingly steered. It's like that's what it is. It's weaponizing us and how emotional we are in response to things, and we can all become so damn callous and just like sealed off. So it's
Okay.
tough, man, because someone will come out online and they'll be way too much of a dick. They'll be like, "You're being too much of a dick." And be like, being too much of a dick about me being too much of a dick." And then we're just like in a cat fight all the time. Yeah.
Well, okay, so here's a thing. Like, there doesn't seem to be consistency with like the
Yeah.
way we handle things, because,
Yeah.
and here's a really good example. When you look at, like, if a little kid pops his bubble, right? We go, most parents are like, it's not the end of the fucking world, like, get your shit together. It's not, relax, it's just a bubble, we'll get you more bubbles, whatever. And it's almost like we're saying it's not acceptable for you to make this a big deal, right? We're basically saying, like, this is not a good time for me to try to see it from their perspective, that to them it's, the bubble's a big deal.
Yeah.
But we look at the perspective of when he gets the bubble, right? Pretend you give him a bubble machine, right? And he has this extreme excitement. We don't diminish his perspective then. We don't go, hey, I'm glad you're excited about this thing, but I got a fucking Corvette. That thing is stupid. Like, it's not a big deal. So that you're overly excited, like, so in other words, like, why do we pick and choose when we diminish or devalue their experience? Like, it's weird, right? Because it's like, we never go to a little kid and say, hey, stop getting so excited because I got you a fucking Spider-Man cupcake. You like, it's just a cupcake. You know, it's like we we don't. It's but yet when they cry because they dropped the cupcake, we're like it's just a fucking cupcake. Who cares? But then while we're giving it to them, we're glad they're excited. Like it's awesome that they think this is the best thing ever. So it's like it's weird. It's almost like we're not consistent, and
Yeah.
and it's almost like we're trying to make our job as a adult easier by saying like, hey, I'll take in the good. Like you thinking this is a big deal, I'll enjoy this excitement of it, and I won't tell you that it's really not a big deal because I look like the man. But then when you drop it, and now you thinking it's a big deal becomes difficult because now you're crying and you're upset not to deal with that. Then it's like, okay, now's the time to tell them, hey, it's not a big deal. Like it's that it's just a stupid cupcake. We can go back to the bakery and get you another. Who cares? It's just a cupcake. Or I'll make I'll get you something else. It's like it's weird how it's almost like we want to get. It's like the coach or the professional athlete, the basketball player, soccer player who wants all the gratitude of their anytime they achieve something, but they don't want any of the backlash or when they make mistakes. It's like you only want the good and you don't want the bad. And it's like, so we only want the good of when kids think, by diminishing their experience when they're heartbroken, and then not having a problem with them, enjoying something more than the average person because of their perspective. And does that make sense? What I'm trying to say?
No, I understand what you mean. I've always thought like one thing I use as an example for people getting along with each other is that we're basically just agreement engines. It's like, oh, I agree with you. It's like, I like that you agree with me. It's like, we're friends now. And that's kind of like how it works. It's like, we're just agreement engines. We go out there and like gain momentum off of agreeing with each other.
And these friends, you just literally gave them the trick. Like, who cares if you agree with somebody or not? Just tell them you agree with them, and they will be your friend. Like, you don't have to do this Friday night. Find a group of people, and whatever they like to do, just be like, yeah, that shit's awesome. I love, whatever it is. And next thing you know, you're best friends.
Well, I'll agree that it's a good way to get social acceptance, not necessarily friends. And you never know what kind of weird group you're going to end up hanging out with if you're just agreeing with everything that they throw at you along the way. Some people start out normal and then it gets pretty slippery pretty quickly. But yeah, that's one of those things that like I see that as the construct of what people are like when we go out and try and people with one another. It's a tough task, man. It's surprisingly complicated, and yeah. I'm not great at it. I don't know how to give people advice on how to people better. Making friends, agreement engines. That's a good one. Start with that. Try it.
It is a way of connecting with people. One thing that has helped me a lot with connecting with people is that I'm a very curious person. So when somebody is into something, like, and I don't know much about it, and even if I do know a little bit about it, maybe I would just want to learn a little more about their perspective on it or their knowledge that they have on it. I'll ask a lot of questions, and people will be like, okay, this person's into the same thing that I'm into because they're curious about this thing, they're intrigued with it, and it's really, it's not fake because I'm truly like curious and just about whatever maybe. I mean, you could be a knife maker, you could be a whatever, a welder, and and next thing you know, I'm asking about like, okay, can you weld this type of metal? Can you not weld this metal? Like, does metal have memory? Like all these things. And next thing you know, you get somebody talking, somebody who could maybe at first seem quiet, and then you get them talking about something that they're interested in, or whatever hobby they may have, and all of a sudden they open up to you because you're connecting. And so without a doubt, like that's a great technique with connecting with people, is like be curious about and actually be interested in what other people like. It's not about just talking about, and I'm basically stating like it's not just all about you, while I invited you on to be interviewed and then did most of the talking. So I seem like an asshole, but
it was us just hanging out. And as far as like, I know what you mean. It's like the book, How to Make Friends and Influence People. It's like the top 3 things in that book that it says. It's like ask questions, remember people's names, and like genuinely be interested. It's like
I got
that's
2
the
of those
3
things. I got 2.
Yeah.
The name thing, I am horrendous with. I am so bad with freaking names.
Yeah, same.
The thing with me is like I am so interested in our conversation that when you say your name and we start talking about something, my brain goes right to the conversation because I'm like, I'm really good. I have limited, you know, hard drive storage, you know. So like with me, it's like, okay, I'm gonna try to hold on to information that I think is crucial and important, and then stuff that's like not as important, I'm like, okay, whatever. So if I meet somebody, I don't know if this interaction is going to be something that I'm gonna really care to reflect on or go back on. So you meet somebody, you know, you meet people all the time, like, hey, what's up? My name is David. And then next thing you know, you're in a really interesting conversation, and you're deep in the conversation. You're intrigued with what they're doing, and now you feel like a dick because you're like, I didn't even remember his name, and I know everything about him. I know that his wife left him. I know that he works here. I know that he, you know, he's into this and this is his favorite sports team. I know all the more personal information, and I don't know his name. And that happens to me all the time, especially at the gym, because there'll be people that I've, you know, they go at the same time I go, or I've seen at the gym many times throughout the years, and you know, we'll do small talk, and they've telling me everything about their lives, and I don't know their name. And it's like years later, I'm like, how do I ask him now? I'm like, I've known this guy for like 3 years. You know, I'm probably going to be invited to his wedding, and I don't even know his name. You know, it's like, well, maybe not that extreme. I don't know if somebody sends an invite to their wedding, I will hopefully know their name. But
Hopefully it'll say the name on the invite.
point,
You
but
know, I think that one kind of solves itself. Basically, you just got to hide it for however long until they get married, and
like,
then make sure that you get invited, and it's problem solved.
okay,
Yeah.
now I disagree with you because what will happen is I'll get it in the mail and I'll be like, who the
Who
fuck
is
is
this?
Dave?
Yeah.
Like which guy at my gym looks like a Dave? I don't know. You know, it's like
No, no, there's pictures for wedding invitations now. It's not. It's like there's entire online websites and things. It's a culture. You got bridezillas. It's a whole thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, it is a cool. It's like diamonds, you know, engagement rings. It's all become a business.
I don't know, man. It's a special kind of craziness that I'm not especially privy to or down the barrel of. So we'll see how that kind of thing unfolds moving into the future. Maybe women will suddenly stop caring about worthless rocks as a prerequisite of sticking around for a dude. That'd be nice. I don't know. We'll see how the cultural trends of our assimilation wane in time. Maybe question mark. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Dear God, because like, man, so many of these customs that we have, they're just advertisements. You know, they're not customs. They're just advertisements. So it's like, is that crap going to stick around when they stop advertising it? I really hope not. Like, I don't know. Uh,
Well, it kind of makes like once it becomes a part of a culture as an advertiser, you've won because it's like
yeah,
now it's literally a part. It's not, you don't even have to advertise buying a or buying an engagement ring for your significant other. Now it's just like that's what you do. That's what our culture does. That's what our people do. So it's like it's, you know, it's just one of those things where it's just like you almost have to go to the history of everything to find out like, okay, is this really organic or was it just advertising?
oh yeah, no, I agree with that. But I mean, just like, what's the campaign of getting rid of diamond rings as being a normal thing, other than making everyone who has a diamond ring realize that it's not actually worth anything? So it's like that's another example of them tying it so perfectly to how we feel about it that we will go our entire existence not being able to look at what's real about it, you know? Because it's like you could grow better diamonds than you can find in nature in a laboratory environment that are just like perfect, and then we're still like sinking like months of our life savings into the things to be able to buy them to appease someone else's emotional thing that was sold to them by an advertising company so that they could have it work even after they stopped advertising. It's just like this is the level of crazy that we live in. And then we prioritize her feelings or one another's feelings because otherwise we're never going to get married. So yeah, that's the situation. It's funny.
Yeah, it's so true too. They talked about how synthetic diamonds they don't sell. Like you can make them lab create and nobody wants them because it's like Bridezilla.
Doesn't make any sense. None of it. It's completely emotional terrain that they'll use logic to like bludgeon us with until it's so complicated we can't figure it out anymore. And then we'll feel a certain way and we'll just accept it. And it's like I think everyone's kind of just accepting that we don't understand anything, you know? I think that's where we're at right now. It's like I feel like that a lot of the time. Even if I try and understand something a lot, it's like I'll get wrapped up in it, and then it's like I know a lot about it, but you can't talk about it with anyone because once you know a lot about something outside of the box of the people who control the conversation, you're not allowed to like, and then you go nowhere. So it's like if we're agreement engines, we have to have like the same stuff in our engine to agree on, that kind of thing. Yeah.
That's a really good point. Yeah, if you go too far down a rabbit hole, unless you meet somebody
Yeah.
who, like yourself or myself, who is truly curious about like somebody who went down a rabbit hole or is an expert in something.
Yeah, we're far gone, man. Like when you meet people who are like totally far gone. Yeah.
That's
I
why.
wasn't cutting you off. I was elaborating. Like, yeah.
No, dude, cut me off, please. You probably should have cut me off a couple more times today. Was there anything that you wanted to talk about today before we wind down? Anything?
No, I just wanted to hang out with you again, see what you're up to, like touch base on a variety of different things, see what's going on in your world, that kind of thing.
Well, mission accomplished. I definitely didn't shut the hell up this little show.
Yeah, whatever. I'm happy to touch base, go into a lot of different kind of things. Yeah, for the people listening, if you haven't touched in with me so far and know what I'm about, I'm an artist who makes a show called Conspiracy Synergy, and it's basically like the trailer for the entire conspiracy movement. It's like try and go over all the different kinds of themes, introduce you to the alternative media, and then you can use it as an outreach tool for your friends and family to get them in the know and up to speed too. And so that's conspiracysynergy.com. And I'm Teace. My website is teace.ca because I'm up in Canada and it's cold and it sucks and we have a dictator. And that's the situation.
You do have a dictator. Yeah, that's yeah, that's please people check out Conspiracy Synergy. It's on your website, but it's also, I believe, on Odyssey, right? And
yeah, no, and I was on Rockfin now because of you. Thanks for passing me along.
Yeah, you're on Rockfin. Yeah. Oh, that's all. Have you started uploading yet?
Yeah, no, I'm on. I just recently uploaded to Rockfin and Rumble, so I'm also on Odyssey and BitChute and then Internet Archive. I won't post to YouTube because they suck and all they do is censor everyone, so there's no point. And yeah.
Yeah. Oh, great. So it's funny because the other day I was on Rockfin and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to see if Teace is on here yet, and so I'll have to look for it and subscribe to it. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you're on Rockfin. It's obviously we don't know which channel or which platform is going to be the next mostly used by the alternative media community, but it's anybody who gives us a opportunity to share these conversations and our content on their platforms, I'm more than happy to support them. And Rockfin's been pretty cool to myself and many other people who were being censored everywhere else. So to me, like, it's any platform that will let me post, I'll post there. And hopefully one of them will become a little bit more dominant and become the alternative to YouTube, because I know it can be a little bit frightening for people who are looking for alternative platforms, because it's like, oh, you can use Odyssey, or Rockfin, or BitChute, and they're like, which one should I use? And honestly, like, I'm sure everyone has a preference for one reason or another. Like maybe some people like the way BitChute works and looks, and maybe some people prefer. I think Odyssey and Rockfin actually look really good and they're easy to use. So those are kind of the two ones I go to a lot. But Float, they've redesigned their platform. People still share videos on there. You can find all my videos also on Float. So it's like, but that kind of looks more like a Facebook than it does like a strictly video platform. Which gives them their own niche in regards to that. But yeah, so it's like, you know what, that's awesome that you're on there, and it's awesome that they keep taking on more great content creators. And I think having that little extra step to get on their platform is good too. Like I've talked to Martin about this, the CEO, because it forces people to have at least good content to be on there. You're not just letting anybody upload. So it's like when you go to BitChute or Odyssey or some of these other platforms, anybody can create a channel, which is good. But it's all, the one thing about having a platform like Rockfin where you have to submit and then actually get approved to be on there, is that you have much less bad content. It's like everybody's pretty good. Everybody agree with them or disagree with them. It's decent. It's a decent channel. They're putting in their some decent amount of work to put out good content. which, so, you know, I can see both perspectives in regards to running your platform either open to the public or one that's a little bit not so open to the public. And but yeah, but I'm, you know, I'm glad you got on there. I'm glad I could help. And hopefully people who are listening, because I'm also on Rockfin, are going to Rockfin. If they subscribe to me, hopefully they subscribe to you. And are you, so you got a episode that's around the corner, right? You're working on, because when you finish one, you're probably immediately working on the other one.
Yeah. Oh my God. No, I just put one up, Normie Outreach episode, which is really designed to just be fun and engaging and funny, and a way to send that out to people and try and have them tiptoe towards the truth if they don't feel as if they can make the plunge and dive deep right away. The next one I'm trying to figure out, and it's tough to do that right now, just because I have to understand where people are at emotionally and kind of what's coming down the pipe conspiratorially, what with the agenda that they're trying to pull off and all the different directions they're coming at us with. And so I already did the fake alien invasion one, so I've got that. Hopefully, if they go that direction, I've already got it covered. But it's like, now I'm just trying to figure out how to explain a lot of kind of what we were talking about earlier with the objective difference between right and wrong, because so much of what people's confusion is about is what they return to assess the merit of something at any given time. You know, it's like we're always fighting about something, like what you were talking about. What's the significance of the bubble bursting? Well, it's like, is the car on fire? That's the first question. It's like, we're not going to talk about the bubble if the car is on fire. So it's like figuring out how to calibrate people's understanding of emergency and also of objective truth and morality and all that kind of stuff. It's paramount to us venturing into these conversations being had more and more in a variety of different, very trying ways in the uncertain future that's unfolding in this technocratic nightmare that the elite are constantly shoving down our throats. So it's an interesting journey trying to be a creative entity in the midst of all of that fuckery afoot. That's what I've been tap dancing to anyway.
I just found your channel. There we go. Awesome.
Yep.
Look,
it's nice to go fix stuff.
Awesome. Please, people, go subscribe to it. Check out his channel. Support his work, because that's the other thing that's super important. As I know, it's very hard to get support for content creators, and you know, like we've been saying, I don't think people realize how bad things are. And I think the work of shows like yours and mine and so many other great content creators throughout the last couple of years, I think they you kind of take for granted, you know, all the research and ability to kind of gather some interesting information and seek out some type of truth to give it to the common person who's just too busy to maybe do it, or not as motivated as we are to do that research. We kind of take for granted how important that work is, and then when shit hits the fan, like 2020 did, all of a sudden it's like, thank God Conspiracy Synergy exists to kind of connect the dots for me. Thank God the Ripple Effect podcast and Corbett and Del Bigtree and Last American Vagabond and the No Agenda show and all these shows and Jason Burmis and all these great content creators that were helping connect the dots. You know, thank God they exist, because if we weren't doing that work, if we weren't creating this content prior to this, then when shit hits the fan, you wouldn't have anybody to help you stay sane and you know, make sense of this, you know, nonsense.
Yeah, it's kind of like an interesting fusion between the duty of citizenry and the people who kind of had it as a peripheral hobby, that the more in which you dig into it, the more in which you realize, wait a minute, this is actually how the world really works. And then it becomes less of a hobby, and then you're like, oh crap, it's gonna kill us all. We kind of have to tell each other about it. And so that's the weird place we're in history now, of the citizens hobby trying to wake everybody up to the nefarious crap afoot. It's really weird. Yeah. So it's a trip, and I'm happy to be on it with all of you guys, trying to reveal the truth to a general public who's gradually opening its eyes, very gradually, but they'll get there.
Awesome. Well, I think I'll see you in a couple hours. Are you making the Union Unwanted tonight?
Yeah, sure. Are you gonna be there, or are you gonna pass it off?
So we had I play in a basketball league, and our team, for some reason they switched around the schedule and they moved a game to today, Monday night, and so we have a game tonight. I'm just trying to figure out how many guys we have showing up. If we have enough guys showing up and I'm not necessary, then I won't feel bad leaving them hanging, because it's like, okay, you got enough guys, you can, you know, you'll be fine. But I just don't, I know how it is when I'm one of the guys who show up and we're like, wait, where the fuck's the rest of my team? Like, we only have 5 guys. Where's everybody? So I don't want to, put them in that situation. So once I figure that out, then I'll hopefully figure out. It just sucks because it's like I could have had a 6 o'clock game. Then worst case scenario, I could be late, but it's a 7 o'clock game. So it's like if I go to the game, I'm pretty much effed. So in regards to you don't want it. So I'm gonna once I'm done with this, I'm gonna try to figure out who's making it and who's not making it and how many guys we have, and then hopefully I can show up. But I know that we have a pretty good lineup tonight. If people are wondering what the hell we're talking about, the Union of Unwanted, we live stream in Rockfin every other Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, and it's hosted by myself, Charlie Robinson, Midnight Mike, and Sam from Tinfoil Hat Podcast and 20 other podcasts that he hosts. But I'm sure if you listen to Ripple Effect Podcast, you know of the Union of the Unwanted. But just a reminder, we do live stream on Rockfin every other Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, and then you can find the show on many platforms, Odyssey and all the audio platforms. But yeah, so we already have a great guest list for tonight. I started gathering some people because I was talking to Charlie this afternoon, and I'm like, dude, I've been busy, and I didn't know if I could make the show. And I didn't know if you guys wanted to go ahead with the show or not, whatever. And then the last second, we're like, yeah, we'll go ahead. If you think there's a slight chance you can make it, then we'll go ahead and do it. So and I'm like, okay. So I'll start throwing out some invites. And you were one of the people I invited, and I was happy to see that some of the people that I invited last second can actually make it, which was surprising because you never know. Obviously people are busy or whatever. And but hopefully I'll see you in a couple hours. And we'll talk again soon, or we'll listen again soon because it's very important to talk on that.
You should just get one of those little clip-on containers for your phone and check in and out of the game and still be a part of the podcast. That'll be an eventful.
I'll be at my game, sweating.
Yeah.
I mean, basically those shows. If it's a smaller group, you can, it's much easier to get some thoughts in. But sometimes if it's flowing, man, I'm completely okay with just taking the back seat and just listening, because I, as you know from this episode, I do enough talking. So I
do the same thing when I'm on Union of One, and I'm basically just like, all right, everyone else talk. Maybe I'll say 30 or 40 seconds worth in between a bunch of other people, kind of like being quite adamant about a position. But I know what you mean. It goes like that sometimes.
Yeah, and what's cool about that show is that way more people are okay with doing that. Grime America's on there all the time. We sometimes have to really push Graham to like say something, and then Graham is completely cool with just listening. And it shows you how many of the people who are on the show, they truly are just trying to seek out truth in regards to like, hey, let me, if there's a group of people having a thought-provoking conversation, my ego is not going to get in the way of the conversation. Like, I'm going to use this as a learning possibility and use it as an opportunity to maybe take in some information or listen to these perspectives and not be distracted by other stuff. Because sometimes when you're hosting, you're thinking about like, what's the next question, or where do I want to take this conversation, or is the audio sounding good? Do I need to adjust this, adjust that? So it's like you can be distracted on that show. A lot of times it's almost easier to listen because you're just there and everybody's kind of flowing. You don't feel like, hey, I got to be ready to jump in, or I have to be ready to change the subject or whatever, because typically once it starts flowing, it's good. Like, it kind of handles itself. And it also shows how respectful people in the community are, because we really do very little in regards to like trying to get the point across that everybody deserves equal time and let people talk and all. Like, it never really becomes an issue. And so that's awesome too. It seems like one of those things where it wouldn't work as well as it does, and and I think it does, which is awesome. So, and it's a great way of people connecting and all that stuff. So we do get some people who hate the too many people on the show, but I'm like, there's plenty of one-on-one conversations, like you can find those anywhere. Like, what makes that show unique is that there's a lot of different people all together that wouldn't normally maybe all be together. And maybe these two people have talked before, maybe those two people have talked before, but they haven't talked with these other additions and the combination of people. So I think sometimes that's what makes the unique, episode and conversation. So, if you like that type of thing, it's great. If you don't, then, I'm okay with it too. That's the nice thing about all of us doing our own solo shows, that we have that benefit of having one-on-one conversations if we want to. We also have the benefit of sharing a big Zoom conference call type show and I believe in, like, it's no different than having a company and you gather a team to come up with the best ideas. That's kind of like what we're doing. It's like we're gathering a team of thinkers to come up with the best ideas, and together we can kind of challenge each other. We can throw things out on a table and we can kind of all kind of expand on it. So it's awesome. But I'll let you relax a little bit before your next venture, and we'll hopefully talk again soon in a couple hours. And of course, as always, I'll send you links to this show once it's up and live, and I'll also send you copies of all the hate mail about me talking too much.
Okay, I'm I don't know. I'm not well versed in the hate mail department yet, and I don't imagine you are either. But one of your fans maybe is breathing down your neck a lot lately. I'm sure you're doing just fine. I can't imagine that hate mail is your newfound department. Like, tell me, what's the actual worst stuff you get?
I talk too much, which isn't
Okay.
that bad because it's probably, and it's funny because I was talking about this on a pod. I don't know if it was one of my podcasts or maybe I was on somebody else's show, but the idea that as time goes by, you do so much talking that you're almost like, I think when you first start a podcast, it's like, oh, I'm doing all this research. You have the dilemma that you talked about. Like, you do all this research and you have all these interesting thoughts and ideas and conversations that you have nobody in your life to have them with. And you start a podcast and all of a sudden you have the ability to share those ideas and things you've been researching and things that you think are important and just interesting things with the public. And as time goes by, you get a lot of those ideas off your chest. And then it's like, now I'm using it a little bit more as, it's always a balancing act. It's like, okay, how much of the podcast is being used for me to kind of share some of the interesting things that I've been thinking about, and then how much of it is to extract some of the interesting things the guest has to offer, and then and then the mixture of all of it. So you try to kind of balance it all out. And I think as time goes by, sometimes you kind of go more in the other direction, where you end up I've done a lot of shows even recently where, like, I feel like I've been more of a listener than a presenter or host. I'll just kind of like, and which is not always easy. People think sometimes, the talking less is easy, but I always feel pressure to make sure my guest doesn't feel pressured to have to fill every dead air. Like, I don't want somebody to think that, like, hey, I just want to ask a question and then just sit back and like hit record and be like, oh, here's my episode. It was super easy. Look how great of a host I am. Like, I brought you this amazing episode. And it's like, well, why should all that pressure be on my guests? Like, like you said, it should, I enjoy the conversation. Like, I enjoy, there's going to be moments. And sometimes when I'm editing shows, like, I'll see like one track, it's like, oh, well, that was a little Ricky track heavy. It's like, and I'm like, oh, and no, but 99% of people who listen to the show are super nice. I'm kidding. Like, back in the day, I think I didn't have loyal listeners, like as much as I have now. Like, I have a lot of long-term listeners who understand, like, there's going to be episodes where maybe I talk a little more, but there's also going to be episodes where, I balance it out. And sometimes it's just, it's like anything. It's all a matter of like, what's on your mind in the moment. What are you going through? How much energy you do or don't have, where the conversation takes us. Maybe the conversation takes us down a path where you have more to offer than I do, or maybe I'm just more, I'm just in that mood where I'm like, okay, like, I'm listening and I don't have much to add to it, so I'm spending more time listening. It's not so much back and forth. So it's like, in every episode is going to be slightly different. It's not. I don't get guests that are the same every single episode. Like, I'm not the same every single episode because not every episode I feel the same way. I'm not always thinking the same way. I'm not always the same energy level. So to me, it would be hard to be exactly the same every single show and only ask questions and wait for the response, and that's it, right? Like, I can't always, because sometimes I do want to expand on something, or sometimes I want to be like, hey, Teace, this is what I've been thinking about. Like, what's your thoughts on it? Because I want to know if I'm crazy or not, or if I'm dumb or not, or if this is because we can alone, we can convince ourselves of anything. Like, this is a great idea and this makes perfect sense. And then it takes somebody else's perspective to say, yeah, but I'm seeing it this way. And you're like, oh shit, that's right. I never even looked at it from that perspective. So it's, it's a dance. And I think people who understand that it's a conversation and not an interview, those are like, anytime I get a comment that says like, I hope or the host talks too much or whatever, whatever it may be, like uh, most of the time I know that it's not a regular listener. It's not somebody who it's somebody who ran into one episode that maybe I did talk too much, like this one, and and then they think that that reflects every show. So now they're really, it sounds like the comments in about the show in general, when it's really maybe about one episode where for one reason or another I might have dominated the conversation a little too much. Your ability to talk is kind of necessary to have a podcast. I mean, you can't not have that, ability. And like any, ability, like it can be used for good or bad. And sometimes it's used for good by creating a great conversation, and sometimes it's used for bad by ruining what possibly could be a good conversation.
Yeah, the whole idea of public conversations is itself a really peculiar phenomena. That it's like, I guess it kind of came about as a byproduct of the whole uh like late night show environment, because that's sort of what it replaced. But it just became us talking to each other rather than us all convening around a particular person trying to be a particular way, having frivolous conversations with celebrities who you don't know anything about. So it's interesting to see the medium of what we used to get in that way now just become something that's commonplace, and then try and navigate it ourselves with like how much you talk, what you say. It's like it does bring kind of like, or it can bring a certain like pressure to it, but at the same time I find it's a really interesting, just like, you're just talking to another person. That's it. Yeah, other people are listening, but like really you're just talking to another person. And so once you come back to that, it's pretty just straightforward, you know.
Which is the feeling I am like, that idea of like just feel like you're talking to somebody and don't think about thousands of downloads. Don't think about it being posted on all these websites where people are going to run into it. Like, I don't think about any of that stuff. I just, which is probably one of my gifts and curses at times, because it's like, maybe I should think out this way more before I say it on the air, because thousands of people are going to listen to it. Or maybe it would lose some of the pizzazz, right? It would, the comfort, the casualness of the show would be lost if I'm just, everything I'm saying has to be profound and everything I say has to be well thought out. It's like, well, that's not how human conversation interaction necessarily works. And that's all I'm trying to do, is capture human interaction between two people, So it's yeah. But maybe all this excuse making will set back some of those hate mail people from hitting send.
Yeah, no, if that's a problem they have, they didn't make it through this episode. So it's like
If they made it this far, they're true believers. They're in my cult. They're well, thank you so much, Teace. I'll send you the Zoom link to the Union of the Unwanted show shortly, and hopefully I see you then.
Yeah, for sure, dude. Good hanging out. Have a good night.
Hey, thank you. Take care.
Yeah.